Chapter 266, The Devil You Know. At the core of it, things were indeed rather simple. Sonny hated the Black Knight enough to do his due diligence, and thus spent an incredible amount of time studying it. He was so motivated to kill the creature that had hurt him that he had even gone so far as to settle in the same old cathedral as the devil. As a result, Sonny had become a singular expert on everything having to do with the Black Knight. He knew his strengths, he knew his weaknesses, the patterns of his behavior. And most importantly, he knew what type of unnatural powers the devil possessed. Unlike nightmare creatures of lower ranks, devils had access to bizarre and harrowing powers that were akin to the aspect abilities of the Awakened. That was what made them so dangerous, and that was why the fact that Sonny had learned the Black Knight's power was so vital. Unlike the Spire Messenger, whom they had to fight blind, the cohort was going to go into battle with the fallen devil fully aware of what they would face. As such, they could plan, come up with strategies, and make preparations. Knowing your enemy was half the victory. The second half was knowing yourself. The smile disappeared from Sonny's face. Leaning forward, he said,
"The Black Knight is truly a living nightmare. He is as strong, fast, and indestructible as you would imagine a fallen devil to be. I've seen countless creatures fall to his sword, no matter their shape, size, rank, or class. He is just too powerful."
Effie giggled.
"You're not really making your case, Sonny. You know that, right?"
He glanced at her and grinned.
"That's not even the worst part. What really makes him an incarnation of death is not his astonishing might, but the darkness that lives in the grand hall of the cathedral and seems to obey him. When wrapped in that darkness, the Black Knight can move fast, unseen, and without making a single sound. His physical traits are vastly enhanced, turning him into an unstoppable engine of slaughter."
Sonny grimaced.
"What's more, any damage done to him is instantly repaired as long as he is surrounded by the darkness. Inside of it, he is basically immortal."
The members of the cohort glanced at each other with dubious expressions. Only Changing Star remained indifferent. A tentative smile appeared on Sonny's face. Turning to Nephis, he said,
"But that is where you come in, Neph. With your radiant light, that darkness will vanish. Your flames can strip the bastard of his greatest weapon. Without his dark power, the Black Knight is nothing more than a powerful abomination. He will be only slightly more dangerous than a demon of the same rank."
Castor stared at him and said, his voice flat,
"You say it as though a fallen demon is an easy enemy to face."
Sonny shook his head.
"No, I'm not saying that. I fully understand how hard that fight will be. In fact, I understand it better than any of you. The truth of the matter is that even with the Dawn Shard, our weapons won't be able to wound him. Not because his flesh is too tough, but because he is covered in heavy armor from head to toe. I'm not even sure that there is any flesh beneath it, to be honest. There is only one chink in his armor, and that is the visor of the helmet."
The Black Knight had 2 burning red embers instead of eyes, so Sonny didn't even know if the bastard had a face. Kai shifted a little and said with uncertainty,
"So the only way to kill him is to hit the crack of the visor. I am not sure that this is possible. On a fixed target, sure, but on a moving one, especially one that fast and deadly, I can't promise that I'll manage that."
The others nodded, expressing their agreement. Sonny smiled.
"Ah, yes, that would indeed be tough. Luckily, we don't have to."
He paused for a moment, and then revealed the secret that had taken him a long, long time to uncover.
"The truth is the visor is a trap. It seems like a weak spot, but it's not. The real weakness of the Black Knight is not even protected by the armor."
A dark expression appeared on his face. Indeed, after observing the devil for months, Sonny had come to the conclusion that the secret to destroying the damned thing hid not in finding a way to pierce the bastard's armor, but in destroying his terrifying greatsword. By watching the Black Knight fight against countless nightmare creatures, Sonny had been able to notice a curious pattern. Just like the members of the cohort, the abominations who wandered into the cathedral tended to instinctively go for the eyes of its guardian. But the bastard didn't care about those attacks at all. He did, however, tend to protect his sword against most powerful blows, going so far as to receive them with his body instead of blocking or deflecting them with the obliterating black blade, as if wary of any damage being done to it. By focusing on this pattern, Sunny had confirmed that the sword was indeed the only thing that the fallen devil seemed to be reluctant to put in harm's way. It was his true weakness. Nephis tilted her head slightly and echoes his words.
His sword.
Sunny nodded.
Yes, if we want to kill the Black Knight, we will have to destroy his greatsword. That is the only way.
Effie blinked a couple of times, then glared at him in outrage.
Is that what you call not being protected by the armor? Of course it's not protected by the armor, because it's even tougher than the armor, you doofus.
She shook her head.
How are we supposed to break a sword fit to be wielded by a fallen devil?
Sunny smiled.
Oh, you don't have to. In fact, I insist that you don't. You are there to help me, but no one can kill that bastard except for me. No one, you understand. So, your task will be to hold that fiend off. Leave the sword to me.
The huntress scoffed.
That's not really an answer. If none of us is strong enough to even come close to breaking such a powerful armament, how are you going to destroy it?
Sunny stared at her for a bit, then shrugged.
I am not going to destroy it. Do I look like someone who can destroy it? No, I don't, and I can't.
A dark grin appeared on his lips.
Oh, but the stone saint, I am willing to bet that she can.
She was able to slaughter 2 fallen beasts before even becoming his shadow. Not that Sunny's own shadow had grown strong with almost 1,000 fragments fueling it with power. There were very few things in the Dark City that the saint couldn't destroy with its help. So yes, he was willing to bet that she would be able to break the sword of the Black Knight. In fact, he was going to bet his life on it. If you are enjoying this story, please like the episode and share it with a fellow reader. Now let us return to the tale. 2 days later, they entered the Dark City once again. Nephis was right. No one from the castle was there to ambush them. Gunlog seemed to be content letting them come to him instead, so his hunters and the dreadful hunchback were nowhere to be seen. Just as well, the cohort scaled the impregnable gray wall late in the evening and spent the night in one of its towers, almost like how Sunny, Neph, and Cassie had done all that time ago. When the morning came, they headed toward the ruined cathedral. The ruined streets of the cursed city surrounded them once more. After months spent in the labyrinth, their monotone colors seemed strange and bizarre. There was nothing but dark stone and dust around, with rare islands of crimson leaves and moss growing through the rubble, and swarms of terrifying fallen creatures, of course. It was nice to be home. Sunny caught himself thinking that and blinked. He had never thought that one day he would feel sentimental about returning to this cursed, ancient prison. And yet, there was a strange feeling of comfort deep in his heart now. It had been there ever since they had crested the city wall.
What weird creatures we humans are. Truly, there is nothing we can't get used to.
Glancing at his companions, he noticed that they were feeling the same way, especially Effie, who had spent years surviving, hunting, and even thriving on the streets of the Dark City. She even called it a paradise once. The only kind that humans deserved. Sunny sighed. Regardless of the strange ideas the huntress had, he believed that humans weren't meant to live in a paradise. If they were to ever find one, they would quickly turn it into hell. Just like what the humans trapped on the Forgotten Shore were doing right now. Soon, the ruins of the magnificent cathedral were in front of them. The members of the cohort stopped some distance away, looking at the ancient temple with dark expressions. The journey through the Dark City had turned out to be uneventful thanks to Effie's masterful guidance and the shadows scouting ahead to help her learn of any dangers ahead of time. But the real danger hid at the end of the path, and now they had reached it. Sunny had spent the last 2 days teaching the rest of the group everything that he knew about how the Black Devil fought, what his habits were, and how they had to approach the upcoming battle. They were as ready as they were ever going to be. Turning to them, He lingered for a few moments and then said,
Remember, I must be the one to deal the final blow. It is very important to me.
Looking at him with a complicated expression, Kai sighed.
Why are you so obsessed with killing this devil, Sonny? Won't it be better to leave that creature be? I just don't understand this whole endeavor.
Sonny smiled.
Have you ever been gutted, Kai? And I don't mean emotionally. I mean literally with a sharp piece of metal.
The charming archer shivered. The smile disappeared from Sonny's face.
Yes, I was. That bastard over there cut me open with his big sharp sword and left me bleeding to death in a ditch. So, it's only fair that I do something similar to him, is it not? I don't know how it works with you citizen folks, but out in the outskirts, you don't let things like that go. Simple as that.
The day you let a person who hurt you walk free was the day you announced to the world that anyone could stomp on you with impunity. After that, it was a short road to the grave, or worse. So people in the outskirts were very serious about their grudges. Granted, the Black Knight was not really a person, but the same principle applied. Kai stared at him with a complicated expression, then asked in a strange voice,
Really, then, how did you survive?
Sonny turned away and moved his shoulders slightly.
A combination of good attributes and powerful memories. That's how I survived. Well, most of me did.
With that, he shook his head and gritted his teeth in anger.
Enough talk, you all know the plan, so let's get it over with.
Today, Sonny was going to reach the pinnacle of his hunter career. He was going to hunt the devil. Inside the tenebrous grand hall of the majestic cathedral, darkness reigned unopposed. It drowned the vast hall, clinging to its walls and tall columns. The rare beams of light falling through the narrow windows only served to make it seem deeper. 6 humans entered the temple, the light of their lantern memories failing to pierce the veil of darkness even slightly. For a moment, there was utter silence. And then, a sudden yell broke it apart.
Now.
A tall young woman with silver hair and calm, striking gray eyes raised her sword. Then, a wave of brilliant white light shone from it, reaching far and wide. The darkness was instantly torn apart and obliterated, vanishing into the deepest, darkest corners of the cathedral. And there, right in front of them, a giant clad in black steel armor was revealed, his sword already on its way to reap the lives of unfortunate fools who had dared to desecrate the silence of the ancient temple. The great sword he wielded seemed as heavy as the stone pillars that supported the roof of the temple. Falling from above, it looked like a vertical tier in reality that revealed the impenetrable darkness hiding beneath. What could stop such a monstrous blow? Perhaps the shield that contained the weight of the heavens themselves could. Effie dashed forward, raising the dusk shard. The heavy shield received the terrible impact of the devil's unstoppable attack. A deafening sound of steel clashing against steel rolled across the grand hall like a sound shockwave, growing louder as it reflected from the stone walls. The shield held. The floor beneath Effie's feet, however, did not. It cracked and shattered, sending the huntress reeling back. A pained yelp escaped from her lips. The Black Knight lingered for a moment, seemingly surprised by the obliteration of the darkness that had shrouded him. However, his hesitation lasted only for a fraction of a second, not nearly enough for the humans to prepare themselves for his next attack, and it was already coming. Without paying any attention to Effie, who was flying back, the devil turned with astonishing swiftness and aimed his sword at Nephis. But before he could perform his second strike, a massive piece of rubble the size of an adult human suddenly flew through the air and crashed into the armored giant at full speed. All the Black Knight could do was lean forward and meet it with his shoulder. The boulder exploded into 1,000 pieces, leaving the devil unscathed. The creature that threw it walked through the dust with utter indifference, 2 ruby flames burning behind the visor of her helmet. The Stone Saint had arrived to face the Black Knight. The Stone Saint walked toward the Black Knight with stalwart indifference. Her body shone with dark radiance, and there were wisps of ghostly gray fog dancing on her elegant armor. The ruby eyes of the taciturn monster burned with menacing crimson flames. The darkness that served the devil had been vanquished by changing stars' incandescent light, but the shadows populating the ancient temple only grew deeper because of it. Now, they were shifting, as if reaching toward the saint to fall upon her shoulders like a mantle. Without slowing down, the shadow raised her shield and hit its rim twice with the edge of her sword, as though challenging the Black Knight to battle. With the two creatures finally facing each other, it became even more apparent that there was a mysterious connection between the two of them. Despite the fact that the Black Knight towered above the graceful living statue, their general appearance and the design of their armaments were eerily similar. It was just that in front of the intricate stone-like armor of the shadow, the devil's own formidable full plate, which had been masterfully forged from indestructible black steel, seemed almost crude. Facing the original masterpiece, he looked like a clumsy imposter. Sonny knew that his intuition was right when he caught a hint of the same dim, nascent emotion that the shadow had shown toward the walking colossus. Despite the fact that the fallen devil was vastly more powerful than her and both outclassed and outranked her, witnessing him, the stone saint felt nothing but disdain, contempt, even. All of these observations had not taken Sonny more than half a second. In the next moment, both creatures dashed forward and collided in a furious clangor of metal. The battle had begun. Now that his core was close to being saturated to the brim by the shadow fragments Sonny had collected from hundreds of nightmare creatures, and a few humans, the augmentation provided by the shadow was able to make him powerful enough to almost reach the level of an actual awakened. By the same logic, the stone saint should have been brought very close to the power level of a fallen abomination. Sonny even suspected that she was enhanced by the shadow even more than he would be himself. The shadow and the shadow seemed to intertwine perfectly, almost as if this was the true purpose of the augmenting facet of his aspect. The saint had slaughtered two fallen beasts even before becoming a shadow, although it had been at the cost of her life. What would she be able to do now, reborn and reinforced by the mystical power of his divine aspect? Kill a deadly bastard of a fallen devil, hopefully, but still, the gap between the two of them was just too vast. Even with the help of the shadow, the stone saint was clearly not a match for the Black Knight in terms of sheer power. Luckily, she was not alone. As the two creatures collided and turned into a whirlwind of steel, the humans joined the fight to support their monster. Castor appeared at a terrible speed, striking at the giant black sword with his elegant giant. The ghostly green blade slid off the surface of the greatsword without any result, but the impact of his strike managed to slow the Black Knight by a fraction of a second. That was all the stone saint needed to deliver a blow of her own, closing the distance to the giant fiend in order to turn his size and reach superiority against him. She struck upward at the pommel of the greatsword with her shield. The hands of the Black Knight were thrown above his head, and using that opening, she bulldozed into his abdomen with her shoulder, sending the giant reeling. The violence of the impact was so fierce that several fractures appeared on the surface of her stone-like pauldron. As the dull metal sound rang across the grand hall, shards of stone flew into the air. But it was not in vain. The momentary gap in the defense of the devil allowed Nephis to deliver a devastating thrust with her silver longsword. Enhanced by the annihilating white flame and the miraculous enchantment of the dawn shard, the sword hit against the breastplate of the Black Knight's armor and broke through, sinking deep into the body of the fiend. For a moment, everyone froze, stunned at the ease with which they were able to pierce the seemingly impregnable armor of the fallen devil. Just a moment before, Castor's giant didn't even leave a scratch on the black steel of the fiend's greatsword. But then things took a sharp turn for the worse. The Black Knight did not seem to care about several inches of incandescent steel penetrating his chest at all. Regaining his balance, he indifferently swiped his sword down, forcing both Nephis and the stone saint to stagger back. The black blade hit the marble floor, causing the ground to shake and throwing Neph to the ground. Before anyone could react, the devil let go of the hilt of his sword with one hand and delivered a shattering backhanded blow to the shadow. The strength of that strike would have been enough to pulverize any human, but the stone saint was made of a far more enduring material than flesh. Still, the living statue was thrown back like a broken doll. Almost instantly, the Black Knight turned to Nephis once more. The terrifying sword flew into the air, ready to split her apart.
I was right.
A savage smile appeared on Sonny's face. Brandishing the midnight shard, he dashed forward and let out a fierce battle cry. Plan C was very simple. It was born out of the prediction Sonny had made when discussing how they were going to kill the devil. He had suspected all along that since Neph was a perfect counter to the Black Knight's most dreadful power, he would concentrate all his attention on dealing with her first. In short, the devil was going to make killing Changing Star his #1 priority. Nephis was indeed a perfect counter against the living darkness, but even better than that, she was the perfect bait. The black blade fell down, missing Nephis only by a hair's breadth. She rolled back and performed an impossible handspring, launching herself into the air from the ground. Landing on the marble floor with an effortless grace of a trained acrobat, Changing Star slid back a few meters and came to a stop some distance away from the devil. But he was just as fast. No, much faster. The giant was already lunging forward to skewer her on the tip of his terrible greatsword. She shifted slightly. Dodging the deadly attack, dashed forward along the vast length of the black blade. Her sword flashed through the air and impacted against the vambrace of the menacing armor, leaving a deep scratch on its dark surface. Everything was happening so fast that other members of the cohort were having trouble joining the fight. The stone saint had just landed on the marble floor a moment ago and was currently rising back to her feet. Effie had recovered from receiving the full brunt of the Black Knight's first attack and was rushing forward, but she was still a few meters away. Kai had drawn his bow, but couldn't send an arrow flying without the risk of hitting one of his companions. With how potent the enchantment of the blood arrow was, this was something he could not allow to happen. Cassie mostly relied on echoes to fight, and since they were not enhanced by the Dawn Shard, their utility in this battle would not have been high. More than that, they risked being destroyed by a single strike from the devil. As such, she was relegated to holding back for now, and would only join the fight if things really went south. So for now, it was up to Sonny and Castor to slow the fiend down. Their only saving grace, and the point that Sonny had explained in detail, was that the terrifying greatsword, while deadly and utterly unstoppable, well, almost, was ultimately an unwieldy weapon. The Black Knight was strong enough to throw it around as though the giant blade weighed no more than a feather, and skilled enough to turn momentum and inertia into useful tools as opposed to obstacles. But he still had to obey the laws of physics. Even more importantly, the damn thing was very long, which meant that they had to stick to the fallen devil like glue in order to use its long reach against him. As the steel giant sidestepped and pulled his greatsword into a vicious horizontal swipe aimed at Changing Star, Sonny closed the distance between them and approached the devil from the opposite side. The midnight shard flashed, striking at the elbow joint of the plate armor. All Sonny achieved was leave a small scratch on it, but he also pushed the Black Knight's hand down and closer to his body a bit, changing the angle of the swipe slightly. At the same time, Castor dove under the terrible blade and suddenly appeared right in front of the devil, thrusting his giant at the steel helmet. The Black Knight just turned his head slightly, causing the ghostly green blade to slide off the helmet without doing any damage. At the same time, he let go of the sword with one hand and threw his elbow back, almost smashing Sonny's skull in, all the while continuing his deadly strike at Nephis. Nevertheless, their tandem attack helped Changing Star avoid being cut in half. Taking a swift step forward, she raised her own sword and received the blow on its blade. Since she had time to close the distance and was now mere centimeters away from the devil, the part of the greatsword that hit her was close to the crossguard, and as such, did not carry too much destructive force. Still, it was enough to send her crashing onto the ground, the sword sliding from her hand. Even with the three of them fighting together, they couldn't slow the cursed creature for more than a moment. But then a moment was all they needed, because it gave Effie enough time to rejoin the fight. It also gave Kai the opportunity to take a shot. A black arrow streaked through the air and plunged right into the crack of the devil's visor. Sonny noticed a startled expression on the charming archer's face. He himself was stunned, too. No one had expected Kai to actually hit the bastard right in the only chink in his armor, least of all Kai himself. The head of the Black Knight was violently jerked backward, but in the next moment, Kai staggered and groaned.
Curse it, why am I always right?
Sonny had anticipated that result too. He had guessed a long time ago that there was no flesh beneath the menacing black armor. Rather, the armor itself was the nightmare creature, or at least the vessel for the evil soul of a powerful revenant. As such, there was no blood for the ghastly arrow to drink. That's why Kai had been affected by the backlash of his fallen memory despite hitting his target, just in case something like that happened. Sonny had tasked the charming archer with fashioning a few mundane arrows out of splinters of bone that was everywhere on the forgotten shore, so Kai wasn't entirely out of the fight, yet. However, the amount of damage he would be able to do to the terrifying devil was not extremely low, but Sonny had no time to lament this turn of events. The battle was only growing more chaotic and fierce. Thanks to the incredible precision of Kai's shot, the Black Knight was disoriented for a moment. Effie arrived just at the right time to use it to their advantage. Leaning low, they used the momentum of her lunge and the bone-breaking weight of the dusk shard to deliver a devastating blow to the thigh of the steel giant. As another shockwave of sound rolled through the grand hall, the fiend staggered. But a fraction of a second later, he brought his armored fist down on the mighty huntress, causing her to reel away with a pained scream. The pommel of the black sword lurched forward, catching Castor in the chest despite how fast the proud legacy was moving. He crumbled to the floor like a broken mannequin. Lastly, the Black Knight turned his blade to Sonny, causing him to retreat. The damn bastard was simply unstoppable. None of their attacks had achieved anything except for annoying him a little, pushing herself off the ground. Nephis looked at the fallen devil that towered above her like a bastion of darkness. Her face was pale, and there was blood flowing from her mouth. What's worse, the silver sword had slid far away and was now out of her reach. The incandescent radiance disappeared from its blade, allowing for the darkness that hid in the corners of the grand hall to slowly begin crawling back. Nothing stood between her and the Black Knight anymore. Suddenly opening his eyes wide, Sonny glanced into the depths of the cathedral. And then, a simple scream escaped from his lips. As the silver sword was extinguished, Changing Star lingered for a moment. White flames ignited in her eyes, and suddenly, the pristine white breastplate of the Starlight Legion armor was enveloped in blinding white light. The darkness that had begun to seep back into the grand hall of the ancient temple reeled away once more. It appeared as though Nephis changed the target of her miraculous aspect ability and used her armor as its conduit instead of the sword. But from the side, it simply looked like there was a furious white star burning in her chest. That momentary delay almost cost her her life. As soon as Sonny's scream echoed through the cathedral, the terrifying black blade came down once again. This time, Nephis seemingly had no chance to escape, but somehow she did. Pushing herself off the marble floor, she twisted her body and barely avoided the falling guillotine of the Black Knight's greatsword, then swiftly rolled away. The next moment, she was already on her feet. As the devil lunged forward to crush her, Changing Star did something that no one would ever expect the proud daughter of the immortal Flame clan to do. She turned her back to the enemy and ran. From their early days in the labyrinth, Sonny knew that Nephis could be incredibly fast when she wanted to. And indeed, just a second later, she was already far away. Cursing under his breath, he followed. No matter how fast Nephis was, the Black Knight was faster. The devil was already pursuing his runaway prey, moving with a celerity that seemed strange for a creature of his size, especially one clad in an incredibly heavy suit of steel armor. With each moment, he drew closer and closer to Changing Star, his sword ready to reap her life. Straining his muscles to their limit, Sonny ran as fast as he could too, desperately trying to catch up to them. With Effie and Castor temporarily put out of commission and Cassie and Kai sidelined, he was the only one left. He had to make it in time, no matter what, if he didn't. Gritting his teeth, Sonny somehow managed to accelerate even more. Nephis was already halfway through the grand hall of the cathedral. The statue of the nameless goddess on the far side of it must have appeared in her sight. It was then when she suddenly stopped and turned around, sliding on the marble floor a few meters because of the momentum. The silver sword had already been dismissed and summoned back from her soul sea. It seemed as though, out of desperation, Nephis decided to mount one last suicidal attack on the swiftly approaching steel giant, or maybe she had just gone crazy, but it only seemed that way. The corners of Sunny's mouth curled upward. Plan C was about to come to fruition. Changing Star had performed her role perfectly. Well, what else did Sunny expect from her? All that remained was to stall the Black Knight for a few seconds. The devil descended upon the silver-haired girl in a fury of obliterating black steel. Nephis met him with her usual calm resolve, dodging strike after strike with incredible skill. Just like a lifetime ago, when she had been facing Castor at the dojo of the academy. She used her understanding and control of the flow of combat to breach the gap in speed between her and her opponent. She wasn't as much reacting to the deadly blows delivered by the devil as predicting them, moving to evade the strikes of the black greatsword before they could even happen. Of course, this deadly dance could not last. The tiniest of mistakes would have been her last. And even if she didn't make any, Nephis was not going to be able to keep this level of concentration for long, not to mention the insane toll this fearsome clash took on her stamina and endurance. But she didn't have to. All she needed to do was to keep the bastard busy for a couple of seconds, and when those seconds ran out, a sudden crack of breaking stone resounded in the darkness of the ancient temple. In all the commotion, the stone saint had strangely disappeared, after Sunny had confirmed that the fallen devil was targeting Nephis above everyone else, their strongest combatant. His shadow was nowhere to be seen. That, of course, was on purpose. She was laying the groundwork for the plan to work while the rest of them kept the Black Knight distracted. The plan, however, could only happen in a certain spot in the Grand Hall. That was where Changing Star had to lure the Black Knight in case he fixated on her. Following the descriptions provided to her by Sunny, she led the devil deeper into the cathedral and stopped just in the right place. And then, she engaged him in a fierce battle to give the saint time to close the trap, which she did by taking a running start and crashing with all her weight into one of the tall, magnificent pillars supporting the roof of the cathedral. This pillar, in particular, was damaged at the base, making it uniquely unstable. Sunny knew every corner of the ruined temple like the palm of his hand, so he knew about this flaw of the pillar as well. That had been what he based Plan C on. As Sunny ran, he could see everything that followed in all its majestic brutality. The breaking of stone resounded in the vast hall of the ancient temple. A net of cracks appeared on the massive, incredibly tall column and quickly spread to a deep gash in its base. Shards of stone flew in every direction and the column began to topple. It seemed slow at first, but in fact it wasn't. In the center of the hall, the Black Knight paused his relentless onslaught for a moment and turned his head, following the sound of cracking stone. He was a second too late. As Nephis dashed away, the pillar fell on the devil, crushing him under countless tons of hard stone. The massive pillar plummeted down and fell right on the Black Knight. The devil turned slightly at the last moment, lowering his sword to the ground. His crimson eyes flashed with unassailable menace. As a thunderous crash resounded in the dark hall of the ruined cathedral, pieces of stone and clouds of dust flew into the air. A feeling of savage joy ignited in Sunny's heart. Without slowing down, he dove into the dust. Of course, he didn't think the fiend would be destroyed by his trap. But it had to do some damage to the fearsome black armor, at least. Nearing the place where he had last seen the tall, dark figure, Sunny witnessed an incredible sight. The pillar was floating high above the ground, its crushing weight resting on the shoulder of the steel giant. In the place of the impact, its surface had cracked and shattered. The Black Knight, however, had not escaped unscathed as well. His heavy breastplate fractured, revealing nothing but a mass of impenetrable, living darkness within. The pauldron on the shoulder that had received the blow was practically destroyed, leaving that whole arm hanging listlessly, twisted at a strange angle. The helmet of the devil was dented and covered by a net of small cracks, each seeping with ghostly crimson light. The Black Knight did not look good, if utterly terrifying. What was even better, though, was the fact that he was currently stuck under the pillar, unable to move. Sonny had to make us of that situation. But before he could, the devil raised his broken arm and placed it on the column. Then he lowered his head as though gathering his strength, and effortlessly threw the monumental stone pillar into the air. Sonny's eyes widened. Diving down, he barely avoided the flying wall of granite. The pillar flew above his head and crashed down onto the marble floor, then rolled several times and came to a rest in a deafening rumble of shattering stone. The length of it blocked the grand hall, cutting the way for the rest of the cohort, and also Sonny's path of retreat. Not that he had any plans of retreating. Regaining his balance, Sonny brandished the midnight shard and dashed toward the wounded Black Knight for a vicious attack. Both he and the stone saint arrived at the same time. However, the fallen devil was still a force to be reckoned with. Despite the fact that his armor was cracked and his speed was somewhat diminished, there was still enough power in his body to obliterate all of them. Holding the greatsword with one hand, he suddenly pulled it into a fearsome slash. The black blade whistled through the air, cutting a chaotic arc around the fiend. Sonny was forced to jump back, but the shadow managed to deflect the blow with her shield and redirect its power, slowing down only a little. In the next moment, she closed the distance to the Black Knight and delivered a terrible strike of her own, aiming at the base of his sword's blade. The knight simply moved the sword away, then violently bashed her in the head with the pommel, casing bits of the stone-like metal to fly into the air. The saint staggered back, the visor of her helmet shattered. Unlike the mass of darkness hiding in the black suit of steel armor, there was an actual face beneath hers. Sonny allowed himself to stare for a fraction of a second. This was his first time seeing the face of his shadow after all. The stone saint looked just how he had imagined. Her skin was gray like granite, and the features of her face were almost like that of a human, with the exception that they were just too flawless. It was as though she had not been born, but actually cut from stone by a mad sculptor, one obsessed with absolute perfection. As the result, what should have been beautiful looked eerie and hideous instead. In fact, glancing at the inhumanly perfect face of his shadow, Sonny felt nothing but a cold sense of revulsion. Fright, even. The fact that her haunting face was utterly devoid of any hint of human emotion only made it even more disturbing. The shadow caught herself from falling and dashed to the side, avoiding another strike from the terrifying giant, which was effortlessly chained after the first one. The greatsword fell down once more, shattering the marble plates of the floor in the spot she had been just a moment ago. It was then that Nephis rejoined the fight. The three of them attacked the Black Knight simultaneously, perfectly coordinating their assault. Changing Star threw her longsword forward, aiming to sever the broken arm of the devil entirely. The stone saint went after the greatsword again, and Sonny did something crazy. Dashing to the enormous black blade, he stepped on its surface and ran up, using it as a ladder. He had a solid second of stability before the greatsword was pulled into another attack, feeling it moving beneath his feet. Sonny used the momentum to jump up and grab onto the helmet of the terrifying fiend. Mounting the devil, he hung from the Black Knight's neck and delivered a savage stab at his shoulder. His aim was just a centimeter away from the edge of the pauldron. Sonny's hand was empty when he started the strike, but by the time it reached its mark, the moon shard was already grasped in it. During their journey back to the Dark City, he had noticed that Ascended memories received a less dramatic enhancement from the Crown of Dawn. Unlike the Awakened ones, they weren't elevated by almost an entire rank in terms of power. The augmentation, however, was still significant, enough to breach the gap between the ghostly stiletto and the armor of the fallen devil at least. The needle-sharp point of the moon shard broke through the impenetrable steel and sunk deep into the shoulder joint of the indestructible black armor. Obviously, Sonny knew that this strike would not do a lot of damage to the fiend, but dealing damage was not his goal. Devil or not, fallen or not, the Black Knight still had to obey the laws of physics. In particular, having several inches of steel, glass, stuck in the joint of his armor was inevitably going to reduce the mobility of his arm. Indeed, with both of his arms damaged, the speed with which the fiend was able to move his greatsword around considerably diminished. It was still utterly terrifying, nevertheless, but not insurmountable anymore. Just a moment faster than the Black Knight, the stone saint stepped over the black blade and pinned it to the floor with one of her greaves. Using all of her weight to keep it down, she threw her sword aside and raised her shield high above her head with both hands. For a moment, time slowed down. And then the shadow brought the shield down, delivering a devastating blow to the weakest point of the greatsword. The rim of the stone shield hit against the black steel. And with a deafening ringing, the greatsword shattered. Augmented by the shadow and with the help of 900 fragments that Sunny had collected, the saint had become incredibly strong. The graceful stone body of the taciturn monster hid incredible power to begin with, and now it was vastly enhanced. Holding her shield with both hands, the shadow delivered a devastating blow at the weakest point of the black blade. The blade, which was pinned between the marble floor and her greave, rang deafeningly and shattered, still mounting the Black Knight. Sunny grinned with vicious joy. Then he let go of the dented helmet of the devil and pushed himself off, performing a backward flip and landing nimbly several meters away. Nephis immediately disengaged too. Both of them knew that nothing was more dangerous than an enemy on the brink of death. With nothing to lose, humans often relinquished any sense of self-preservation and turned berserk, taking their killer with them to the grave. Nightmare creatures were much the same, only more terrifying. Despite the fact that Sunny was sure that the devil's weakness hid in his sword, he wasn't certain what would happen if the blade was actually broken. Hopefully, the Black Knight would just crumble into a pile of steel. If not, it would be better to be far away when they found out. As the shards of the black blade rained on the floor and the stone saint fell on one knee, a shudder ran through the devil's body. The darkness hiding in the corners of the ruined cathedral suddenly boiled and lunged forward in a wave. But none of it reached the Black Knight, annihilated by the radiance of changing stars' intricate white armor. The devil froze in a twisted pose, his hands powerlessly hanging down his back bent. The black steel of his armor was rusting. It was swiftly turning dull brown, its luster gone, its once impregnable surface looking corroded and brittle. Then, he slowly and laboriously raised his head and turned it slightly to the side, as though staring at the face of the nameless goddess, whose statue oversaw the dark hall of the ruined cathedral for thousands of years. As the devil looked at the goddess, the crimson light of his eyes slowly weakened and dimmed, and then suddenly exploded into furious red flames. The rusty armor came apart, exposing the mass of darkness hiding within. The darkness stretched its limbs and rose above the kneeling shadow, the parts of the armor that floated in it giving the creature a vaguely humanoid shape, revealing its true form. A ghostly colossus made of darkness and rusting steel towered above the taciturn monster like an omen of death, two crimson fires burning furiously in the black depths. Another flame appeared just beneath them, like a twisted mouth made from the flames of hell. And then a terrifying roar shook the ancient temple. Sunny took an involuntary step back, a feeling of dread rising from the depths of his soul. His eyes searched for Nephis and found her standing a few meters behind the stone saint. Changing Star was hesitating, looking at the dark apparition with an uncertain expression. She caught his gaze, lingered for a moment, and then nodded, understanding what Sunny wanted to convey without the need for any words. Then Nephis cautiously backed away, not letting the devil out of her sight. What was going to happen next was not something a human could survive, not a sleeper at least. With a harrowing fury, the creature of darkness crashed down on the shadow. Its hands tore through the air and wrapped around the taciturn monster's neck, then raised the living statue in the air as though her stone body weighed nothing. The devil brought the saint high above the marble floor of the ruined cathedral and squeezed her neck as though trying to strangle her. A net of cracks streaked through the shadow's armor, bits of stone falling down. Through all of it, the emotionless expression on the hauntingly inhuman face of the saint did not change one bit. But in her ruby eyes, a hint of a feeling appeared, much stronger than ever before: disdain. Letting go of the shield, she raised her hands, grasped the vambraces of the rusting armor, and easily shattered them in her grip. As another roar resounded in the darkness, the taciturn monster fell back to the ground. Landing with nimble grace, she instantly dodged the claws of the apparition, which had bent down to shatter the living statue once and for all. Then she took a step forward. The stone saint was right beneath the leaning devil now. As her ruby eyes flashed with ruthlessness, she lunged forward and delivered a crushing blow to his chest. Her gauntlet tore through the breastplate of the rusted armor and sank deep into the living darkness, right where a human heart would have been, or a soul core. A moment later, the crimson flames burning in the depths of the dark creature exploded into a wave of blinding red light, and disappeared. The dark essence of the devil dissipated like fog, its remnants vanquished by changing stars' radiance. The pieces of armor fell to the ground in a clangor of steel. The terrifying devil of the cathedral, the Black Knight, was dead. Sonny threw his head back and let out an exhilarated, vengeful laugh.
Die, you bastard. Die and go to hell forever.
Oh, revenge tasted so great. A moment later, the voice of the spell whispered sweetly into his ear.
You have slain a fallen devil, forsaken knight. Your shadow grows stronger.
Sonny smiled.
Is anything else you want to add? A memory ends an echo.
However, a moment later, he forgot all about the spell. A cold shiver ran down his spine, because right in front of him, something very strange was happening to the stone saint. Her hand was still raised, frozen in the same position as when she had pierced the heart of the living darkness with her fist, and in it, grasped in the shadow's fist, was a strange, beautiful, and ominous gem. It was utterly black, as though suffused with impenetrable darkness. The glossy black surface seemed to devour light, turning the vast hall of the ruined cathedral even darker than it had been before. Deep within that black void, crimson flames burned with a menacing red glow. It was pulsating in a slow and bizarre rhythm, drowning everything around in dim red light. Painted by it, the stone saint seemed to be drenched in blood. The gem she held looked like a bloody, still-beating heart that she had torn out of someone's chest. Gazing at it, Sonny felt a strange sense of foreboding. The gem looked sort of like a soul shard, but different. He had never seen a black shard to begin with, or one radiating such an intense glow. It also didn't seem like a piece of a broken core. On the contrary, it appeared whole.
Is that what a soul core of a nightmare creature looks like?
No, not a soul core, a soul. Stunned, Sonny counted the crimson flames burning in the depths of the black gem. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 flames for the 4 cores of fallen devil. The thing that his shadow held in her hand was the Black Knight's soul, or some sort of his essence at least. By how had it turned into a material form? Did the stone saint do it? If so, how? No, why? As Sonny and Nephis looked in stunned silence, the shadow finally moved. Bringing the black gem close to her face, she lingered for a moment. A hint of a dark and macabre emotion appeared in her eyes, and then the stone saint swallowed it. Sonny blinked. The shadow opened her mouth, bit into the eerie crystal, and swallowed it. Just like that, the soul of the Black Knight was devoured. The red glow it emanated disappeared, returning the world to its natural shade. And a moment after that, the stone saint fell into the shadows and disappeared, too.
Wait, I didn't dismiss her. What the hell is happening?
Nephis looked at him with a perplexed expression.
What just happened? What did she do?
For once, Sonny didn't have to twist the truth and deceive anyone. Opening his mouth, he honestly admitted that he had no idea, walking over to the pile of rusty steel that remained after the devil had been destroyed. Sonny moved it around with his foot for a bit and then mumbled a quiet remark to himself. Changing Star remained silent for a few moments, then frowned. Finally, she said,
You echo is very peculiar.
While everyone was recovering from the fight and tending to their wounds, Sonny walked to a secluded corner and dove into the Soul Sea. The tranquil expanse of still water met him with familiar silence. Glancing at the rows of motionless shadows standing at the edge of it, Sonny noticed that the Black Knight had joined their ranks. The steel giant stood among all the other creatures Sonny had slain, just as empty as the rest of them. There was no trace of the menacing and deadly fallen devil left. Now, he was just one of the shadows. Sonny grinned.
Welcome, you bastard. Make yourself at home. You're not going anywhere else ever anyway.
A feeling of deep, dark satisfaction grasped his heart. Staring at the motionless form of his sworn enemy, Sonny had to stop himself from kicking the Black Knight with all his strength. He was just a shadow now, after all. Kicking him would have been like kicking the air. Plus, Sunny wasn't vindictive to that degree. Killing the bastard once was enough for him.
Who's the one laughing now, huh? I won't deny it, you got me good, but I'm still breathing while you're dead. At the end of the day, that's all that matter.
This world, no, both this world and the real one were full of creatures that were bigger, stronger, and more powerful than Sunny. Many of them had either threatened his existence or felt compelled to treat him like dirt to show their superiority. But he was still here despite all of them, neither destroyed nor subjugated. He was free, alive, and growing stronger with each day. One day, they would be the ones cowering in front of him or be destroyed by him, just like the Black Knight had been. With a dark expression, Sunny turned away and walked to stand beneath the black sun of his shadow core. Then he summoned the Stone Saint. But nothing happened. Sunny frowned, then repeated the summon again, to the same effect. Suddenly worried, he willed the runes to appear in the air in front of him. Luckily, his worst fears did not come true. The Stone Saint was still listed as his shadow.
Then what is going on with her?
Concentrating on the runes describing her name, Sunny made it expand and read.
Shadow Stone Saint, Shadow Rank Awakened, Shadow Class Monster, Shadow Attributes Battle Master Stalwart Spark of Divinity. Shadow Description: Shadow Saint was created by the treacherous Lost from light in the cursed darkness of the Forgotten Shore. Shadow Fragments AD 200.
So far, everything was the same. Even the number of shadow fragments he had fed her did not change. However, there was a new string of runes shimmering beneath that number, where nothing had been before. When Sunny saw it, his eyes widened. The runes read,
The Stone Saint is evolving.
He lingered for a few moments, and then looked up at the shadow core. Somewhere inside, his shadow was resting in the waves of nurturing dark flames, her very being going through a mysterious transformation. It appeared as though consuming the soul of the Black Knight had allowed her to enter a stage of growth that Sunny had not anticipated. How long would that evolution process take? And what kind of a transformation the Saint was going through? Sunny had no idea. However, he couldn't wait to find out. Evolving, the Stone Saint was evolving. Leaving the mindscape of the soul sea, Sunny furrowed his brow. His eyes, however, were full of excitement. What exactly about her was going to change, though? There weren't that many possibilities. It could be either her rank, her class, or her attributes. It was logical to assume that by defeating an opponent of a higher rank, the Shadow would be able to ascend to a new rank herself. However, there was a flaw in that logic. The Black Knight wasn't the first fallen creature Sunny and the Saint had slain. In fact, he was the third, with the Corpse Eater and the Spire Messenger being the first two. That's not even counting the 2 iron spiders the living statue had butchered before falling to Sunny's blade herself. But she had not done anything like pulling a black gem out of their corpses before. So, most likely, what allowed her to absorb the soul of that particular nightmare creature was not the mere fact of its incredible power. It was the strange but obvious kinship that the two of them shared. At least Sunny felt that this guess of his was right. That didn't help him understand what changes would occur to the taciturn monsters, though. Still, it was a very valuable piece of information to learn. In the future, if Sunny wanted to evolve his shadows, he would have to find not only a powerful, but also a suitable opponent for them to defeat. A kindred abomination of higher rank or class. Tilting his head, he tried to remember if there was another creature on the Forgotten Shore he knew of whose soul could be fed to the Saint. For a moment, the image of the walking colossus appeared in his mind.
Yeah or no's not gonna even think about that.
Shaking his head, Sunny smiled slightly and walked over to his companions, now that their deal had been concluded. The future he was so afraid of was finally upon them. The light of lanterns invaded the spacious room that had once belonged to the priestess of this ancient temple. With 6 people entering its peaceful haven, however, it didn't seem so vast anymore. Sunny looked around and sighed. The hidden quarters were just like he had left him. There were pieces of simple, but luxurious furniture carved out of pale wood, with a few mismatched things that he had scavenged from the ruins. The stone walls were decorated with intricate engravings. An empty chest that used to be full of shimmering soul shards stood dark and empty. Feeding the stone saint had really bankrupted him. Sadly, being the master of a hungry shadow was not the cheapest of ambitions. On one of the walls, sets of lines were scratched into the stone, marking all the days he had spent living in the ruined cathedral. For a long time, this had been his home. The best home he ever had, really, which was a sad thing to say about a windowless stone room hidden in the middle of a cursed city. But Sonny liked it a lot. He was going to miss this dark, quiet place very much. The other members of the cohort, with the exception of Effie and Cassie, were looking around with interest. Even Neff showed a bit of curiosity. With a strange look on his face, Kai turned to Sonny and asked,
This is where you lived.
Sonny raised an eyebrow and shrugged. The beautiful archer smiled with visible delight.
No, nothing. It's just that. This place is so tasteful. I did not expect your residence to be this chic.
Sonny frowned.
What did you expect it to be?
Kai looked down, suddenly flustered.
Oh, you know, for some reason, I always imagined you sleeping on a floor in a cave. Yeah, stupid, I know. Why would there be a cave in a temple?
Hearing that, Effie couldn't help but laugh.
And wait till you see what's in his closet, Knight.
Sonny gave her a menacing look, but thought better of saying anything. He understood that the huntress was just trying to lighten the mood. Knowing what was going to come next, every member of the cohort was consumed by fear and doubt right now. Effie more than the rest, because her role in the spectacle that Gunnalug had planned for them was especially cruel. Sonny sighed. A bit later, they were sitting around the hearth, the smell of food still lingering in the air. Everyone was silent, looking at the fire. Their minds consumed with dark thoughts. Sonny knew that he had to make a decision now, but felt reluctant to do so. Instead, he just watched the shadows dance on the walls of the hidden chamber. After a while, Nephis finally broke the silence. Turning to him, she lingered for a bit and then asked,
We will be leaving in the morning. Will you come with us?
Her voice sounded even as always, but Sonny knew her well enough to discern notes of a suppressed emotion in it. Hope.
Hope is the poison that will get you killed.
But no, this was the old Sonny talking, one who was comfortable hiding behind his insanity, one who had given up, who was too afraid to face the ruthless truth and pay the price to take what belonged to him was his by right, triumph, salvation, and hope. Sonny was done being afraid. With a calm expression, he looked at Nephis and said,
The day after tomorrow, I still have things to finish in the Dark City. I will join you the day after tomorrow, for better or worse.
She was silent for a few moments, and then a soft smile appeared on her face.
Thank you. I have some preparations to make too. We will return to the bright castle together then.
He gave her a nod and turned away. Nephis had never shown any sign of being able to feel fear, at least not that he remembered. But he knew that it was just a front. In fact, she knew fear all too well. Better than anyone here except maybe for him. She was introduced to it at a very young age, after all. So he suspected that behind her indifferent face and even voice, she must have been scared too. She was just a young girl after all. And it was she who was going to fight the immortal Bright Lord to the death soon, not them. Sonny looked at the shadows.
One day, after one day, the prophecy will begin to come true.
As soon as the dawn came, bringing with it the mournful sound of retreating waves, Nephis and her cohort left the ruined cathedral. Sonny remained alone, standing on the edge between the darkness of the old temple and the light of the new day. Lingering in the ornate doorway, he remained motionless for a while and watched as the artificial sun rose into the bleak gray skies above the cursed city. After months spent in the company of other humans, being by himself once again felt strange. Just like it had felt strange to be with other people after all the time he had spent on his own here before that. Turning around, Sonny returned into the darkness. The grand hall of the ruined cathedral was peaceful and quiet. Without the menacing steel guardian, there was no one here to disturb the silence anymore. Even the darkness that populated the corners was empty and docile now, not at all the living entity it had been once. It felt sort of lonesome. Freely walking through the echoing expanse of the magnificent hall, Sunny looked around, taking in the sight of the cathedral that had sheltered in the past from a new perspective. Despite spending so much time here, he had never seen it like this. In the same way the inhabitants of the Dark City must have seen it all those years ago. Sunny had only looked down on the hall from the height of one of the ancient temple's support beams. It looked majestic, but it was also not safe anymore. With the Black Knight dead, no one was left to defend the cathedral from the nightmare creatures that would want to claim it as their nest. So Sunny couldn't stay here for long. Not that he had the luxury of that choice anymore. Throwing one last look at the beautiful dark hall, Sunny sighed and began climbing the statue of the nameless goddess. Back in the hidden chamber, it was once again utterly dark. Sunny hesitated for a bit and began collecting his belongings. It didn't take him long. Growing attached to material things was pointless on the forgotten shore. There was no way to take them with him to the real world after all, if he was even going to survive that long. But he still felt sad leaving all of his spoils behind. Back in the real world, Sunny never had a home like this, nor a lot of stuff to call his own. He had dreamed of enjoying a lavish lifestyle after becoming an Awakened, but got stuck in this hell instead. This spacious room he called his home was a form of consolation, but now he had to leave. In the end, he only took the bare necessities and then tidied the place up, wishing to leave it clean and orderly despite knowing that there was little chance of anyone stumbling on this place again. After everything was done, Sunny glanced at the tranquil room and hesitated for a bit. Then, he walked over to the wall where he had once scratched countless lines into the stone to count the days and summon the prowling thorn. He wanted to leave a mark of his presence here, something to tell that he had lived in this hidden chamber, in the ancient ruined cathedral, in the Dark City on the forgotten shore. In this world, a small mark to witness that he had been here, had struggled here, and then left to fight for a chance to escape. Sunny wanted to come up with some profound words, but nothing came to mind. He wasn't really a profound person anyway. What he really wanted to carve into the wall was his true name. But even now, the paranoia stopped him. What if someone would come here one day and read it out loud? What a funny disaster that would be. Finally, he raised the kunai, carved something beneath the lines that marked the days he had spent living in the ruined cathedral. Then, Sunny turned around and walked away. There were 2 runes left on the wall behind him, one meaning sun, the other meaning loss. There were 2 things Sunny wanted to accomplish before tomorrow morning. One was in the ruins of a library that he had never finished exploring, and the other one was right here in the ruined cathedral. Returning to the grand hall with his rucksack on his shoulder, Sunny walked past the statue of the nameless goddess and dove into one of the doors leading into the temple's inner sanctum. He had never been there before, kept away by the living darkness and the Black Knight. But now that the devil was gone, Sunny was finally going to see what was hidden inside. Walking through the rooms and corridors that the priests and priestesses had once used, he looked around and didn't notice anything of interest. Everything was pretty much destroyed and ruined, with only a few mundane things remaining untouched. There was nothing here at all. At least that was what others would think. Sunny, however, suddenly stopped in front of a certain wall and tilted his head. There was nothing special about that wall. At least nothing that could be seen. But he could feel a heavy mass of shadows hiding behind it, as though there was a hollow space there. After searching for a while, he found a hidden lever and pressed it, or at least he tried. The ancient mechanism had rusted through and disintegrated over the thousands of years of neglect, of course. With a sigh, Sunny summoned the midnight shard, looked closer at the hollow wall, and inserted the takai into the seam between its moving parts. Then, he unceremoniously used the unbreakable blade as a lever and pushed with all his inhuman strength. With a terrible scraping sound, a part of the wall slid away. The air rushed past Sunny, entering the dark mouth of a narrow corridor. Behind it, a set of stone stairs led down, deep down underground. With a resentful grimace, Sunny flourished the midnight shard to shake off the dust that clung to it, put it on his shoulder, and entered the secret passage. The hidden passage led Sunny underground, twisting and turning through the mass of stone. Despite the fact that he had been cautiously walking forward for a few minutes now, Sunny felt that he was still beneath the cathedral. In fact, by his estimation, he was approaching its center. And indeed, right beneath the spot where the statue of the goddess should have been, the narrow passage opened into a larger room. In it, a deep well leading even further down was situated. With a winding staircase spiraling down into the darkness, Sunny frowned and muttered under his breath about this place and its creepy dark wells. Going further down was going to place him dangerously close to the catacombs. He knew all too well what kind of danger that would pose. The last time Sunny had ventured into the maze of ancient tunnels below the city, he barely escaped alive. After hesitating for a while, he stepped onto the staircase and began descending. Deep. Ancient shadows surrounded Sunny, giving him a little comfort. At least he was among his kin. After a minute or so of walking down the stairwell, Sunny entered a large chamber that seemed to be carved into the bedrock, as opposed to being constructed by human hand. On the other side of it, a large door forged from black steel stood, illuminated by two burning torches. Two thoughts entered Sunny's mind simultaneously. The first one was that the metal from which the monolithic door was made looked eerily familiar. It was the same dark, lusterless, impenetrable alloy that the Black Knight had been made of. The second thought was even more disturbing. Sunny wondered aloud how those torches could still be burning. Had they been aflame for several thousand years? To think of it, the torches looked very strange. They seemed to be producing light, but it was pale and ghostly. There was no heat that came with it too. The shadows cast by the ghostly flames were the most disturbing though. Because of the movements of the fire, they were supposed to be dancing on the floor, but instead, the shadows were absolutely motionless. It was as though the light of the torches had trapped and paralyzed them somehow. Sunny thought for a while, and that ordered his own shadow to stay back. The shadow did not protest. In fact, it was visibly relieved. Taking a few exaggerated steps back, it merged with the deep darkness at the exit of the stairwell and waited there, glancing nervously at the strange, motionless shadows from time to time. Sunny cautiously approached the black door and lowered the midnight shard into a protective stance. He was ready to face any sort of danger, but nothing attacked him. The only thing that happened was a sudden chill that ran through Sunny's body when he had entered the circle of light cast by the two ghostly torches. Sunny observed that the torches were definitely some sort of protective charm, and that he was almost sure their power could harm even shadows. The question he had to ask himself, though, was this: were the torches meant to keep something from entering the space that hid behind the black door? Or were they meant to keep something in? Well, there was only one way to find out. What Sunny was doing seemed absolutely crazy. But in fact, it was not. He had not come into this underground chamber just because of idle curiosity or because of being blinded by greed and the prospect of finding a treasure. What led him here and pushed him to study the black door was his intuition. By now, Sunny had to admit that his intuition was more than a mere manifestation of his subconscious. It had turned out to be correct one too many times, especially ever since he had consumed the drop of ichor. After that day, he was able to sense the presence of divinity, and sometimes he was even drawn to it, like he was drawn to this cathedral and to the mysterious key that lay buried in the body of the Lord of the Dead. The two seemed connected. And Sunny felt that he was about to find out how and why, but it was not all his intuition was capable of. There were other aspects to it, too. In fact, Sunny suspected that it had more to do with his fated attribute than it had to do with the spark of divinity. If he were to guess, he would say that after he had been changed by the ichor, that attribute was slightly enhanced, giving him the ability to sense subtle tremors that ran through the strings of fate from time to time. The strings that were, apparently, tightly wrapped around his body. The combination of the change that happened to his eyes and his close relationship with those strings gave Sunny a slight affinity to revelations and fate, similar to the one Cassie had possessed, but infinitely less potent. It was enough to guide him to this door and make him want to open it, nevertheless. Stepping close to the monolithic black door, Sonny gazed at it and came to the conclusion that not even an entire army would have been able to break through this monstrous barrier. There was, however, a small keyhole hidden on its dark surface. Pulling on the string tied around his neck, Sonny took off the small metal key that hung on it and gripped it tightly in his hand. After hesitating for a few moments, he carefully inserted the key into the lock of the black door. It fit perfectly. As soon as Sonny put the key into the lock, the faint light of divinity it emanated suddenly became a little bit brighter. Sonny sighed, then readied himself and turned the key. Something clicked inside the metal door, and then it silently opened. The pale light of the ghostly torches swayed, as though moved by an otherworldly wind. Behind the door, a small room was carved into the rock, and in it, a corpse in a dark mantle was chained to the floor inside a circle. Sonny couldn't tell if the corpse belonged to a man or a woman, because there was a strange mask covering its face. The mask was made out of black lacquered wood and carved to resemble the face of a ferocious demon. Its teeth were bared, with 4 fangs protruding from its mouth. The mask was crowned with 3 twisted horns. Inside the black chasms of its eyes, there was nothing but utter darkness. Sonny held his breath, affected by the disturbing scene in front of him. The corpse was kneeling on the floor of the small cell, its hand chained to the floor. There was a circle carved into the stone around it, with countless symbols that Sonny could not understand surrounding it. However, the circle was broken. In the thousands of years since the fall of the Dark City, the floor of the dungeon cell had cracked, with several fractures running straight through the intricate engraving. Whatever it was the circle was meant to contain had either perished or escaped a long time ago. Now, the only thing that remained was a withered corpse. Coming closer, Sonny took another look at the person who had been imprisoned and died under the ruined cathedral, in a cell situated exactly beneath the statue of the nameless goddess. Because of the dark mantle and the black lacquered mask, Sonny couldn't glean a lot of information about the corpse. It seemed to belong to a human, but other than that, everything about it was a mystery. What terrible sin had this person committed to be condemned to this awful death? Strangely, Sonny's intuition was silent. It was as though there was nothing in front of him at all. To his sixth sense, the prisoner of the underground cell appeared as an empty space. Sonny mused that it was weird. This person had clearly been either hated or feared a lot to be locked behind all these barriers. Surely, finding such a creature would affect his fate, so why didn't he feel anything? With a tense frown, he took a deep breath and carefully stepped inside the circle. It was then that Sonny noticed a chaotic mess of runes drawn on the floor near the prisoner's left hand. The sight of them almost sent him into a seizure. Staggering away, Sonny fell to his knees and threw up, groaning a bitter curse. Those runes. Those were the same runes the spell used to describe the mysterious unknown. Only here the intensity of the terrible effect they had on the mind of anyone who saw them was much, much stronger. Sonny snapped, demanding to know what the hell that was. Wiping his mouth, Sonny grimaced and glanced at the masked corpse with a bit of resentment. Then he picked himself off the floor, took a deep breath, looked at the terrible runes once again. Immediately, Sonny felt a splitting headache and a sickening, terrible sensation spreading through his mind. It was as though all his thoughts and memories were being torn and twisted. But despite all of it, Sonny persevered and kept staring at the final message that the prisoner had left behind. He knew he couldn't read the runes. He didn't know that particular language, and the spell either was forbidden, incapable, or refused to translate them. But for some reason, Sonny felt compelled to try. Fighting through the intense pain, he slowly studied the strange runes. And then suddenly his eyes widened, because right below the chaotic mess of them, a line of text was written in the script he was familiar with, the usual runic language that the spell always used. This time, it did not provide any translation. Luckily, Sonny had studied these runes and knew enough about them to understand what was written himself. The last thing the person imprisoned under the cathedral wrote before succumbing to death made him shudder. Scratched into the stone was a short prayer.
Hail Weaver, demon of fate, firstborn of the unknowns.
Sonny stared at the runes until he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Only then did he turn away and closed his eyes. The nauseating dissonance of the terrible runes stayed carved into his mind. Only after several minutes passed did it fade a little, allowing him to breathe again. So, the mysterious weaver whose forbidden lineage he had inherited was, in fact, associated with fate, just like Sonny himself. What were the chances? Sonny muttered that was fated for him, he guessed. The word he translated as demon wasn't the one used to describe nightmares creatures of the third rank, but a different one. Perhaps calling it a spirit or a demon would have been more suitable. A mortal but powerful and ominous deity, one different from gods but sharing the same nature. However, Sonny wasn't that versed in mystical terminology. All he knew was that the runic language was incredibly rich in words describing all types of monsters and creatures, while the human language wasn't. Hence, demon was fine with him. Apart from the tantalizing revelation about the mysterious weaver, he had noticed one other important thing by forcing himself to study the runes. Before, Sonny had thought that there was a single entity that the spell refused to call by its name and simply described as unknown, leading him to call it the unknown. Yes, Sonny was not that imaginative when it came to word choice. Whether the unknown were a kind of beings, a single existence, or a force of nature, he did not know. But now, he realized that there were actually two types of forbidden runes and two things that the spell did not know how or did not want to mention. One was the same as those used in the description of the drop of ichor, which stated that the vile thieving bird was hated both by the gods and by the unknown. It also said that the reflection of the unknown stayed forever frozen in the depths of Weaver's pupils, and that just looking at it drove the thieving bird mad. The other was the same as those used in the description of the stone saint, which was created by the last child of the unknown, and now here by the dead prisoner, who had called Weaver the firstborn of the unknown. Sonny demanded to know what the hell all of this was supposed to mean. His suspicion that Weaver had something to do with the creation of the nightmare spell only grew stronger after learning that they had something to do with the domain of fate. After all, the spell seemed to be weaved out of numerous strings of fate, and there was this being called Weaver, who had the blood of gods in their veins, but was also somehow connected to the unknown. Feeling his headache only growing stronger, Sonny winced and shook his head and muttered that he would think about it later. There would be time to ponder about all this later, or not if he dies trying to escape the forgotten shore. Either way, that time was not now. Turning back to the chained corpse, Sonny cautiously avoided looking at the dangerous runes and kneeled in front of it. He wanted to know what was hiding behind the mask, but as soon as he touched it, the corpse suddenly shattered and fell apart, turning into dust right in front of his eyes. Even its dark mantle rotted and disappeared, as though the thousands of years that had passed since the fall of the Dark City and the destruction of the cathedral finally caught up with it. Soon, all that was left was a pile of dust, and the lacquered mask lying on top of it, its black surface glinting slightly in the pale light of the ghostly torches. Sonny looked at the black mask and the darkness hiding in its eyes. Its features were not as much contorted as fearsome by nature. It was simultaneously fearsome and somber, bestial and regal, as though existing at the border of all things. But most of all, the striking mask radiated a sense of mystery. The vicious fangs, the twisting horns, the black lacquered wood of it all. Once again, his intuition was silent. There was nothing he felt toward the black mask, as though it didn't even exist. Sonny murmured that it was strange. Sonny waited for a few moments, then picked up the mask and brought it to his face to take a closer look at it. But just a moment after his fingers touched the sleek surface of the polished wood, the mask suddenly disintegrated into a swarm of countless white sparks. Acting like water, the stream of light flowed toward Sonny's chest and entered into his body, disappearing into the dark depths of his shadow core. The voice of the spell thundered suddenly, louder than it had ever been before.
You have received a memory.
Sonny remained motionless for a few seconds, thinking about what just happened. By now, he knew that some memories could exist outside of the soul cores, just like how shard memories did. Was the black mask one of them? Somehow, he felt that it wasn't. Sonny muttered, wondering why he was even guessing, and decided to just take a look. The reason he was lingering was because of the magnitude of the situation. Sonny didn't know anything about the mysterious mask, but he believed that this relic of the past was truly unusual. The circumstances that had led to its discovery were too extraordinary, and the place it was hidden in was too uncanny to think otherwise. So he was understandably apprehensive. With a bit of tension, Sonny dove into his soul sea and looked up at the spheres of light floating around the black sun of the shadow core. There was a new one there, which seemed to be much brighter than the rest, summoning it down. He soon found himself looking into the eyes of the dark mask that hovered in front of him. It was as though he was facing an invisible person wearing it. Shifting uncomfortably, Sonny lowered his gaze a little and looked beneath the black lacquered wood. A moment later, he had to suppress the involuntary desire to cover his eyes with a hand. Inside the black mask, 7 radiant embers were burning with such intensity that it almost blinded him, all around them. Incalculable ethereal strings were weaved into a pattern so vast and intricate that it almost seemed boundless. Sonny breathed the words, 7 anchors, gods. Stunned by the visage of the mask's spellweave, Sonny hesitated for a bit and summoned the runes that described it. What he saw made him take a step back and gasp.
Memory Weaver's Mask, Memory Rank Divine, Memory Tier 7, Memory Type Tool, Memory Description. Weaver believed that knowledge was the origin of power and so always hid behind numerous lies, wearing them as a mantle. No one knew Weaver's thoughts, Weaver's face, and Weaver's heart. Even the guards could not see what hid behind the mask. Memory Enchantment's Mantle of Lies. Simple trick.
Sonny had to look away for a moment to take a breath. He breathed that it was a divine memory of the 7th tier, holy hell. Words weren't enough to describe his astonishment. He was, however, surprised to see that the mask only had 3 enchantments. Sonny expected such a powerful memory to have dozens of them. Judging by how boundless and insanely complicated the weave of it was, there had to be that much at least. Just what were these 3 enchantments to require a myriad of diamond strings to support them? Turning back to the runes, he concentrated on the enchantments and read further.
Enchantment Mantle of Lies. Enchantment description hides the identity of its master.
That description sounded very simple, but looking at the spellweave of the black mask, Sonny could tell that this enchantment was anything but. In fact, it was so vast and powerful that his mind was failing to even comprehend the scale of it. The enchantment was indeed designed to protect the identity of the person wearing the mask from prying eyes, but what it actually meant was that any form of detection was powerless against it. And Sonny suspected that any was not a figure of speech in this case, but simply a constatation of fact. For example, Cassie's aspect ability, which allowed her to see a person's attributes, would not work on someone wearing the mask. There were countless similar abilities among the awakened, none of which would work either. Sonny mused that this explained why his intuition was silent about the prisoner and the mask itself. Whatever kind of fate-related sixth sense he had was also countered by that thing. Even more terrifying was the fact that the enchantment was not aimed at just the awakened. The description of the Weaver's mask stated that even the gods could not see through it, and it was honest truth. Nothing could penetrate the barriers of the Mantle of Lies, not even the sight of a god. Sonny gulped and whispered that it was scary. But then, this incredible and frightening enchantment did not even take up 1/10 of the volume of the ethereal diamond strings hiding beneath the surface of the black lacquered mask. The second enchantment was much the same. It was called, by which the spell was telling Sonny that it wasn't going to say anything about it. Its description was also empty. However, Sonny could tell that it had something to do with sight just by looking at the weave. He could also tell that it was not a passive enchantment, but an active one, meaning that currently he could not access it. Usually, that would mean that he would be able to once he became a true awakened, but in this case, the amount of soul essence required to keep the enchantment activated for more than a fraction of a second was so vast that no awakened would have been able to. Only a saint would, perhaps. However, Sonny was not sure that he wanted to try even if he had the ability. The things Weaver saw were capable of driving unholy creatures insane, so it was wise to avoid going anywhere near that enchantment in the future. Most likely. Most of the spellweave of the Weaver's mask, however, was dedicated to the third enchantment, one that was called a simple trick. Judging by the mind-boggling complexity of the pattern that made it possible, That trick of Weaver's was anything but simple, though. It was the most bizarre, intricate, and ingenious thing that Sonny had ever seen. Curious, he glanced at the description and froze, his eyes opened wide, the runes gleaming in the air red.
Enchantment simple trick. Enchantment description reverses the effect of one's flaw.
Sonny remained silent for a long time, staring at the black mask. The tranquil sea of his soul was still and silent, not at all like the storm that was currently raging in his heart. After a while, he thought to himself that Weaver was one sly guy or girl or person or being. The fact that he didn't even know that much only served to prove the point, and he had thought he was good at deceit and manipulation. How devious one must be to not let even the gods, even the nightmare spell, know anything about them. But it was fitting in a strange kind of way. If Weaver's domain was that of fate, there was no other way. Fate was a terrifying but subtle tool. Manipulating it to your advantage required a very special kind of genius, one that was directly opposite to any kind of directness, straightforwardness, and brutal power. However, if given the choice, Sonny would have preferred to face War God in battle than to make someone like Weaver his enemy. Masterful liars were far more dangerous than deadly warriors. He knew it better than most. Exiting the Soul Sea, Sonny hesitated for a little and then summoned the Weaver's mask. The cool wooden surface of the mask appeared on his face, held in place by some invisible force. Immediately, his vision changed slightly. Everything became sharper, clearer, more vivid. Sonny could feel the mask reaching into his eyes and connecting to something. The strange legacy he had inherited by consuming the drop of Weaver's blood. He sensed his intuition becoming more potent, too. It was as though he could almost see the mysterious strings of fate that span across the entire world. Almost. Glancing at the pile of dust that remained of the prisoner, Sonny frowned slightly. The identity of the person who had been wearing the Weaver's mask remained a secret. Just who had this corpse belonged to? And how had they ended up chained to the floor in a hidden dungeon cell beneath the majestic cathedral? The easiest thing to assume was that it was Weaver themselves, but Sonny dismissed that theory immediately. From everything he knew about the original master of the mask, the power of that creature was just below that of the gods, and that of the unknown perhaps. If Weaver appeared on the forgotten shore, the whole dark city would have been wiped out of existence before any harm was done to them. So who could have been wearing Weaver's mask? Some powerful carrier of the nightmare spell that had received it as a memory, just how Sonny did. Sonny ventured a hesitant, well, if Weaver was really a demon, which was a strange kind of a lesser deity, were there a cult dedicated to them? Had there been priests and followers of Weaver? The message the prisoner had left behind sounded awfully close to prayer. Had that person been deemed a heretic and condemned to this place for that reason? Sonny sighed. There was no way to know. Hesitating for a bit, he turned away and left the somber dungeon cell behind. He only had this one day to finish all the things he had left undone in the dark city. There was no time for fruitless pondering. Once outside, Sonny walked over to the place where he had left his shadow and took a look at himself through its eyes. What he saw made him blink a couple of times. Sonny was speechless for a moment. The black lacquered mask sat snugly on his face, hiding his features. He couldn't even see his eyes, which were drowned in darkness. What's more, even his height was somehow unclear. Sonny didn't actually become taller, but from the side it looked as though he did, sort of. 1 second it did, and the next one it did not. It was sort of similar to how people's faces changed when lighted from different directions. In any case, he couldn't tell for sure how tall the person facing the shadow was. Sonny remarked that it was fun. It was not that Sonny became completely unrecognizable, though. He would still have to be careful to hide the context clues about himself while wearing the mask. Mundane things like the way he walked, his usual mannerisms, and other subtle but unique details of his behavior could still betray his identity despite the fact that it was masked from all unnatural means of detection. To truly make himself appear as something else, Sonny would have to put on a performance. Good thing he was practicing the shadow dance then. Was it not designed to fully imitate someone else's battle style and physicality? Sonny drawled about what a wonderful coincidence that was. Finally, the moment he had been dreading came. It was time to test if the simple trick was really capable of turning his flaw upside down. Needless to say, Sunny was nervous. His lips became dry and he unconsciously tried to lick them. But now there was a mask on his face, so he couldn't. That bad habit of his had to be put to rest, apparently. Sunny muttered that it was great and all right, let's do this. Opening his mouth, Sunny said out loud,
"I am's very tall."
In the process, he grimaced, expecting the familiar pain to invade his mind. But there was nothing. Sunny froze, blinked a couple of times, and waited. Still, nothing happened. Beneath the mask, a wide grin appeared on his face.
"I am not only tall but also exquisitely handsome. But that is not all. I am incredibly honest and nice, too. Every girl I meet immediately falls in love with me. Boys, too. That's just how lovable, handsome, nice, and tall I am. Everything I have just said is absolutely true."
His mind was peaceful and quiet. There was no pain, no pressure. In fact, Sunny felt great. He breathed a quiet wow. Feeling an almost overwhelming desire to continue spouting lies, he laughed in exhilaration and exclaimed that it was amazing that this could be. But then a tremendous explosion of pain suddenly threw him to the ground. With a startled yelp, Sunny grasped his head and then groaned through gritted teeth, feeling as though it was about to burst. He yelped, demanding to know what the hell. He just wanted to say how useful the ability to lie could be. He breathed the word, wait. The ability to lie would, indeed, be very useful, which meant that by stating that fact, he would be telling the truth. And the Weaver's mask did not remove his flaw. Just reversed it, so it seemed like while wearing it, Sunny could not tell even a word of truth. Sunny fell silent at a loss for words. That seemed like the right conclusion to make, but he needed to test it to be absolutely sure. With a doomed sigh, Sunny waited for a moment and then said,
"My name is..."
A moment later, another pained scream resounded in the darkness of the underground chamber. Sometime later, Sunny emerged from the ruins of the cathedral with a rucksack on his shoulder, took one last look back and left. Whatever his future was going to be, he doubted that he would come back here anytime soon. It was a bittersweet goodbye, cautiously walking through the familiar streets of the dark city where he knew every turn and every piece of rubble. In this district of it, at least, Sunny kept his guard up. Many things must have changed in the months he had been away traveling through the labyrinth. The nightmare creatures he knew, and more importantly, knew how to avoid might have wandered away or perished, and new horrors might have taken their place. He had to stay prudent and careful. But still, his next and final goal was not that far away. As he sneaked toward it, Sunny thought about the Weaver's mask and the ways it could change his life. At first, he thought about simply never taking it off and walking around while delivering a deluge of lies. This way he would be safe from revealing his most guarded secret and becoming someone's slave, at least. But after considering this seriously, he came to the conclusion that it was not the best decision in his current circumstances. First of all, one couldn't be a part of any collective while lying all the time. Sunny had an unpleasant experience of being expelled from various groups for various reasons, and not being sincere and honest was one of the surest ways to make people want to avoid you at all cost, eventually, at least. And no one was able to survive alone in the dream realm. Not in a way that a person would want to live anyway. Sunny knew a lot about this side of things too. But most importantly, he was not going to be able to keep this lying for long anyway. Not when dealing with people that already knew him. Kai and Cassie would notice the strange effect of the mask immediately. Kai because of his ability to sense lies, Cassie because her ability to see attributes would suddenly stop working. But others would catch on that something strange was going on with him pretty quickly, too, simply because of how drastic the change in his behavior would be, especially Nephis, who knew him so well. After that, they would inevitably have a lot of questions. And answering those questions, even with lies, would put him in more danger than he already was in. So, sadly, Weaver's mask was not a panacea to Sunny's current situation. At best, it would be able to help him avoid certain predicaments if used sparingly. But really, he didn't want anyone to know that he was in possession of that memory at all. Sunny had to think of the future. If he was lucky enough to survive the fall of the bright castle and return to the real world. That was where the black mask could create miracles for him. It would allow him to have a hidden persona that was in no way connected to an awakened named Sunless, and as such, allow him to do and achieve things that would have been impossible or too dangerous to try as himself. To that effect, no one could know that the strange black wooden mask was connected to him, not even people whom he, somewhat, trusted, both for his own good and theirs. Sunny sighed that it was such a pity, though. It was. Just imagining Castor's face, if he were to ever learn about what type of treasure Sunny had somehow found this time, was tempting enough to change his plans. Castor. Sunny's face darkened. He had not forgotten about the promise Nephis had made him at the start of their journey to the Hollow Mountains. Tomorrow, he was finally going to learn what was the deal with the proud legacy, and what exactly the relationship between Changing Star and him was. And how big were the chances of Sunny having to face Castor in battle? Despite all his dislike for the handsome scion of the Han Li clan, Sunny was reluctant to actually fight him. No matter how much progress he had made to get ready for the bloody conclusion of this disastrous chapter of his life, Castor was still not someone to be taken lightly. He was a tremendously deadly opponent just based on what Sunny knew about him, and there were secrets that the legacy had been keeping as well. Sunny wondered about that charm of his, and what it did. He was certain that he would defeat Castor if push came to shove, but the cost he would have to pay for that victory would be heavy. Perhaps much more heavy than he was willing to pay. Suddenly uneasy, Sunny silently shook his head and continued on his way. As the sun began to roll toward the western horizon, he approached his goal, the ruins of an ancient library that stood lonesomely among the decimated buildings. Back near the end of his lonely months of hunting monsters on the streets of the dark city, Sunny had begun exploring this ruin for bits of information about the history of the Forgotten Shore. Because of his chance encounter with the Stone Saint, and then with Kai, which led to him abandoning the ruins for a long expedition into the labyrinth, he had never finished this project. There was this one vast mosaic in particular that Sunny was interested in. It sprawled across the entire floor of the library's main hall and was mostly covered by rubble. In the past, Sunny was not strong enough to move the rubble out of the way. He had been hoping to make the Stone Saint do it for him. But sadly, the shadow was currently slumbering in the depths of his shadow core, evolving into whatever it was she was going to turn into. Just to be sure, he checked one more time to see if the mysterious process was still going and sighed in disappointment. Luckily, he had grown much stronger himself during these months. Sunny was pretty sure that now he would be able to clear the mosaic with his own 2 hands. It was just going to be a lot of work. Sending his shadow into the library to make sure that no abomination had made its nest there during his absence, Sunny entered its cool shadow of the ruin and sighed, muttering that he'd better get started. Soon, the scraping sound of heavy boulders being moved could be heard under the partially collapsed roof of the ancient building. In the depths of the night, Sunny was finally done with the arduous task of clearing the floor of the ruined library. Tiredly standing in the center of the circular hall, he found himself in the middle of a vast mural. The mosaic had endured the passage of time in an almost pristine condition. Most of it was preserved perfectly, with only a few small sections destroyed by corrosion or the ill will of the creature that inhabited the Crimson Spire. By now, Sunny was certain that it was the terror of the Forgotten Shore that had obliterated any depictions of the 7 heroes' faces. He didn't know how it was possible, but felt that the same furious force that had decapitated the ancient statues was responsible for the damage done to the engravings in the ancient mine and to this mural. It was as though the terror wanted to erase any sign of the founders of the Starlight Legion from history. Their names were forgotten. Every person that had known of their stories turned into dust, and even the stones that bore their image were desecrated and shattered. How great the resentment that the evil creature harbored toward them must have been for it to go to such lengths in its mad desire to obliterate their legacy. With a sigh, Sunny turned slightly and walked to the edge of the mural. He was searching for the start of its story. Depicted on the mural was not one image, but a long series of them, spiraling from the edges of the mosaic to its center like a long scroll. On them, the history of the land consumed by darkness was shown, ending with the coming of a new dawn. Sunny already knew what events had brought the curse of all-consuming darkness to the Forgotten Shore, and how the ancient inhabitants of this land fought against all odds to resist it. Now, he was going to learn the final mystery, the reason for their eventual downfall. Finding the first image, he studied it and lingered for a bit. Then, he walked on, watching the history unfurl itself beneath his feet. As the curse subdued the world under the veil of everlasting darkness, and terrible creatures started to attack the human settlements, one after another, mighty champions began to appear to battle them. But no matter how strong, brave, and valiant those champions were, none of them was able to resist for long, especially not when their own allies started turning into monsters. It was impossible to face the terrifying foes hiding in the darkness when no one was there to cover your back. Or even worse, if those you trusted the most to do so were the ones delivering a deadly blow instead. But still, humanity persisted. Months passed, then years, and eventually, a new generation grew up in this horrible world. Sunny whispered that, born in the all-consuming darkness, 7 valiant heroes had given an oath to return the light to the cursed land. Sunny whispered. The people who would later create the Starlight Legion were indeed born in the darkness. They never even saw the light that they would swear to bring back. All they knew of it were the tales their elders had told them, tales of a time when people never turned into nightmares, and the beautiful stars shone even in the darkest of nights. This new generation grew up surrounded by nothing but darkness and horror, and was forged by it into a far more fearsome force than their parents had ever been. Hard times created hard people, and their time was as unforgiving and harrowing as one could imagine. Beyond so, even. And so, the people it created adapted to match this dark reality. Eventually, 7 of them rose above the rest, each leading their faction in the constant battle against the encroaching doom. Sunny stopped and studied the image that showed all 7 of them, even if their faces were damaged beyond recognition. There was a knight in an intricate plate armor forged of white metal with a stalwart blade grasped firmly in his hands. A graceful priestess in a light flowing robe, her delicate hands shining with gentle light. A mighty hunter in an archaic cuirass leaning on a beautiful bronze spear. A masterful builder holding a mason's hammer in his calloused hands. A regal lord with a humble crown resting on his head. A single gem decorating its simple design. A subtle and merciless slayer with a ghostly stiletto hidden cunningly behind her back. And a stranger from a misty land who wore a stone-like armor and never showed his face. With a heavy round shield resting at his feet, Sunny looked at the 7 heroes, thinking. He murmured the names Knight, Hunter, Lord, Stranger, Slayer, Builder, and Priestess. Then the shards: Midnight Shard, Zenith Shard, Dawn Shard, Dusk Shard, Moonlight Shard, and wondered about the other 2, Sunlight Shard and Starlight Shard. The fate of the last 2 shard memories remained unknown to him. Nephis must have known something, though. Otherwise, she would not have ventured into the dangerous expedition to the Hollow Mountains to seek out the Crown of Dawn. Although the history of the Forgotten Shore was presented in more detail here, it did not give him any revelations yet. Thoughtful, Sunny turned away from the image of the 7 heroes and continued on. At some point in history, the heroes came together, created the Starlight Legion, and united the surviving remnants of humanity under its banner. It was also then when they gave their defiant oath. Sunny muttered that they must have been mad, weren't striving to achieve something impossible, the definition of madness. Sunny frowned, knowing full well that, in this case, the 7 heroes actually managed to fulfill their crazy ambition. It was all a little too close to home. He also knew someone who liked to set impossible goals and had an infuriating track record of proving them possible. But how did it all end? Yes, the heroes achieved their dream, but the Forgotten Shore still turned into a desolate hell. What happened to their light? Looking at the next images of the mosaic, Sunny got a feeling that he was about to find out. As Sunny walked in circles, drawing near to the center of the mosaic, he saw the depiction of various deeds that the Starlight Legion had achieved. The warriors led by the 7 heroes were truly a fearsome force, forged and tempered by the relentless malice of their dark world and the unassailable will of their leaders. They drowned the Forgotten Shore in the blood of the cursed creatures, even though many of them had turned into monsters themselves, especially those who had allowed themselves to falter in their conviction. The rest continued on unbroken. Sunny couldn't tell how powerful exactly the members of the Legion were, but from some clues of their battles, he guessed that they were at approximately the same level as the Awakened of his own world, at least at the beginning. With time, however, it seemed as though the warriors of the cursed land had grown much stronger. If most of the creatures they were fighting were of the corrupted rank, then that would put the Legion far above the humans back in the real world. Sunny wasn't sure if the 7 heroes and their soldiers were carriers of the nightmare spell, though, and if the same hierarchy of power could be applied to them. Eventually, the surviving humans migrated to the shore of the colossal impact crater and built an impregnable wall around their new city. This endeavor alone was so arduous and ambitious that he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Sunny slowed his steps. On the images in front of him, the construction of the Crimson Spire. No. It wasn't crimson yet back then. Had begun. The Cyclopean Tower was built west of the city, reaching high into the sky like an axis of the world, like a stairwell that was designed to allow humans to touch the heavens. This was what he was truly interested in. Sunny wanted to know what happened in the spire, how the artificial sun was created, and how the darkness that consumed this land was turned into a transient black sea. What he saw next made him falter, and then close his eyes with an expression of deep, exhausted resentment. In the second-to-last image, the 7 heroes were depicted standing apart in the 7 spots of the forgotten shore. In front of each of them, a crowd of thousands of people kneeled, waiting. Among those people were the warriors of the Legion and the civilians from the city, men and women, old and young. Each of the heroes held a weapon in their hands. Sunny muttered bitterly, of course, this was what happened. What else would it be? A feeling of dark, bitter disappointment grasped his heart. Sunny didn't even know why he felt this way. It was not like he knew anything about the 7 heroes, really. But at some point, maybe because he needed to believe that there was a tiny glimmer of light in the vast and endless night, he had begun thinking of them as a symbol of the best humanity could be. What a foolish thought. He of all people should have known better. Sunny cursed them all. In the last image, one that took the center of the mosaic, 7 tall hills made of dead bodies surrounded the spire. Tens of thousands of people had been slaughtered, their blood flowing like rivers toward the dark tower. On top of each hill stood one of the valiant heroes, their hands stained red to the shoulder. As the last sacrifice, the slaughterers turned their weapons on themselves, thrusting them into their hearts. And somewhere out there, he knew, a tiny black seed floated in a pool of blood. Sunny grimaced in disgust and spat that this was their dream. This was how they decided to bring back the light, and called them sick wretches. As the rivers of blood flowed to the spire, 7 streams of glowing crimson light moved above them and entered it from 7 directions. These streams represented the sole essence of numerous humans who had been sacrificed to create the artificial sun. But theirs wasn't the most terrible fate. In the center of the spire, a lone human figure was drawn, convulsing in harrowing agony as the raging storm of soul energy entered her body. The conflux of all that power, the sacrificial vessel meant to be its conduit, the anchor of the sun. Sunny recognized that figure too. To him, the features of her face were painfully familiar. It was the same face as that of the nameless goddess whose statue stood in the ruined cathedral. The crimson light entered her body and shot from her screaming mouth and eyes upward, pure and white. Rose to the height of the spire where a new sun was being born. Frightened by its light, the darkness retreated underground, where it was locked behind 7 seals that were left behind by the heroes as their last deed. The rest was easy to deduce. After the heroes perished to create the artificial sun, everything was fine for a while. But then, maybe after a few decades, or even hundreds of years, the light of the sun began to dim. So the people of the Dark City had to make a new sacrifice. Perhaps, the second time, only 7 people had been killed to renew the power of the spire. But then it happened again, and that time, 7 was not enough. So they sacrificed 14. And when it happened again, they sacrificed a few dozen. And eventually, hundreds of people were being slaughtered every year to keep the sun burning, because of the simple fact that the 7 heroes and their people, all of them had terribly mighty souls, but their descendants, who didn't have to grow up in utter darkness and fight terrible monsters to live through the day, did not. And at some point in this vicious cycle, the vessel that had been imprisoned in the spire and served as the anchor for the bloodthirsty sun was corrupted. Whatever kind of conscience it had left had been completely shattered. The nameless goddess of the Dark City became the crimson terror of the Forgotten Shore. All that pain, all that rage. All that blood exploded from the spire and infected the very land itself, growing into an endless labyrinth of the strange crimson coral. The 7 seals came undone, releasing that darkness that had been imprisoned underground for hundreds of years. This was what Cassie had seen in the vision. The darkness and the fury of the newborn terror fell on the humans of the Dark City like a tide and wiped them all out, erasing even the memory of them from the face of the world. This was how the Forgotten Shore was born.
And so this is how it is.
Sonny stared at the last image of the mosaic, a dark and resentful expression frozen on his face. Depicted in the center of the mural, a sun fueled by blood shone on the mountains formed by dead bodies. Tens of thousands of people had been slaughtered to create it, and thousands more must have been butchered later on to keep it burning in the indifferent sky. The first sacrifices had died willingly, lured into submission by their fanatical rulers. What about those who came after? Somehow. Sonny doubted it, and for what? How did it all end? The 7 seals had been broken, and the ancient civilization had been obliterated. But the sun created and nurtured by it was not destroyed, just corrupted. It still rose in the morning and fell beyond the horizon after the dusk, illuminating the desolate hell of its own creation. As long as its vessel, the terror of the Crimson Spire, existed at the center of the labyrinth, it would continue to shine in the cold, gray skies. And as long as it did, the darkness that had escaped its underground prison and turned into the cursed sea was going to continue coming and going, scared of its light. Sonny muttered that the two deserved each other. He didn't know why the all-consuming darkness had become a literal sea of impenetrably black water, but had a guess or two. Either hundreds of years spent locked away behind the seals had affected it that way, or the artificial sun had. The terror had been changed by the curse. So why couldn't the curse be changed by the terror in return? Sonny asked why that sun hadn't been extinguished, though. There was no one alive on the Forgotten Shore to make sacrifices to the spire anymore, but Sonny suspected that there was a reason for why the crimson coral seemed to grow either out of or toward bones. If he was right, the whole labyrinth was a giant maw with which the terror absorbed the soul essence of every creature that bled on the coral before it died. It was all a part of its body. Sonny shivered, realizing that both the labyrinth and the dark sea were, in fact, colossal living creatures. It was just that the scale of them was so boundless that they seemed like forces of nature. Compared to the eternal struggle of the two titanic beings, the struggle of a handful of tiny humans was nothing short of insignificant. Or was it? Suddenly, he frowned. What about Nephis and her plan? How did the shard memories come into all of this? At first, a dark thought entered his mind. He imagined that Changing Star was preparing a mass sacrifice of her own, a hecatomb to appease the Crimson Terror. The number of the sleepers being sent to the Forgotten Shore each year was too eerily similar to the number of sacrifices made to the Crimson Spire by the inhabitants of the Dark City to be a simple coincidence. But he quickly dismissed that thought. After all, the sacrifices were meant to renew the power of the Blood Sun. And that was not Neph's goal. If anything, she meant to destroy it once and for all to gain entry to the gateway hidden in the spire. So, what did it all mean? Sonny scowled, remembering every piece of information about the 7 heroes and their cursed land he knew, and most importantly, those that came directly from the spell. After a while, he murmured that time had erased their names and their faces, but the memory of the defiant oath still remained. This was the second part of the description that the spell had given the Starlight Legion armor. His eyes widened. All this time. He thought that this sentence simply meant that the legacy of the 7 heroes lived on even after their deaths. But now, he suddenly realized that the truth might have been far more straightforward. The key to understanding the secret of the shard memories was right in front of him this whole time. In fact, it came from the first memory he had ever gotten on the Forgotten Shore, the Azure Blade. Sonny whispered that on this Forgotten Shore, only steel remembers. He whispered. A sudden understanding dawning on him like a revelation. The memory of the defiant oath remained, and only steel remembered. Sonny rubbed his face and muttered that he was such a fool. Everything he needed to learn the truth had been at his disposal from the very start of it all. The heroes were long gone, but their terrible oath was still here, preserved in cold steel. It was not the memory of it that remained, but the memory. The shards were that memory. Sonny breathed that, of course. It all made so much sense now. But then, what was their purpose, and why was Nephis so motivated to find each one? That was easy to guess, too. Cassie had basically told him all those months ago. Sonny recalled that in the end she had seen a colossal, terrifying crimson spire, and at its base, 7 severed heads were guarding 7 locks. In its fury, the terror of the crimson spire had beheaded the statues of its creators and brought their heads as trophies to guard the entrance to its lair, where Cassie had seen them, as well as 7 mysterious locks. What did a lock need? A key. All locks required a key to either open them or shut them closed. Sonny slowly exhaled. The 7 seals that kept the all-consuming darkness locked underground came undone, but they weren't destroyed. If one had all the keys, it was still possible to seal the cursed sea once again. That was what the 7 heroes had left behind. And with the cursed darkness locked away, the spire would lose its most deadly line of defense. Finally, everything became clear. Sonny remained motionless for a long time, looking at the bloody images beneath his feet. After a while, he sighed and turned away. There was a bitter taste in his mouth. Sonny muttered that he was sick of this place, so sick of all of this. Cassie's vision showed her fire and rivers of blood. Good, it could all burn to the ground. He didn't care anymore. In the cold light of dawn, Sonny approached the spot where the other members of the cohort and he agreed to meet. The Shadow had already located their camp in the ruin of an ancient building and was currently watching them, hidden in the darkness. The 5 youths were busy preparing for the last stretch of the way to the bright castle. They were calm and collected, not at all like people who were about to face the horrifying wrath of the Bright Lord. What kind of horror had they not faced already? Climbing over the rubble, Sonny let Nephis and the rest know of his approach and jumped down. Landing just a few meters away from the group, he straightened his back and gave them an indifferent look. They greeted him in a reserved manner. A palpable tension permeated the air, making everyone reluctant to speak too much. Only Effie was seemingly unaffected by this dark mood. Leaning on a stone wall, the huntress was enthusiastically gnawing on a juicy bone. Her white teeth were effortlessly crushing it into tiny pieces, which were then chewed and swallowed along with the marrow. Noticing Sonny, she smiled. He gave her a nod and wanted to turn away, but then noticed a slight frown that appeared on Effie's face. Looking at him with a bit of uncertainty, Effie ventured, "You all right?" Sonny was silent for a few moments, then smiled. Finally, Sonny replied in an even tone, "I'm perfect." Leaving the doubtful huntress behind, he walked past Castor and approached Nephis. The changing star was standing with her back to the group, looking up at the silhouette of the bright castle that loomed in the distance. Hearing his steps, she turned around. The gentle light of dawn reflected in her eyes, making them appear to shine. He shrugged. Sonny asked, "Why? You didn't expect me to show up." She was silent for a while and then looked away. A lock of silver hair fell on her eyes. Nephis tucked it behind her ear and sighed, then replied, "Could I not? It's not like I know the future." After that, she smiled. Sonny mused, amusing. In the 11 months they had spent on the forgotten shore, this was only the second time Sonny heard Changing Star tell a joke, and the first time it was actually funny, if a little macabre. But what was the harm in indulging in a bit of dark humor at this point? Sonny did not return the smile, however. Glancing in the direction of the bright castle, he asked, "So, what's the plan?" Nephis shrugged, then answered, "This time there is no plan. We have confirmed that Gunlog is still pretending to be looking for Effie to bring her to justice for killing the missing guards. Once we enter the outer settlement, the members of the host will come for her. Then, I will most likely be forced to challenge him. We'll see after that." Sonny looked at her with a dark expression and muttered, "Pretty much exactly what I expected." He didn't hesitate to ask, "Can you really break his armor? Even with the Dawn Shard, your sword is barely equal to an ascended memory. And that thing is a true transcended echo. She lingered for a while before answering. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, and even as Nephis replied, "I don't have to break the armor, I just have to break the man." Sonny shook his head with a humorless smile and retorted, "Good luck achieving one without the other." He paused for a moment, and then said without a hint of levity in his voice, "Anyway, you owe me a conversation." Changing Star glanced at him, then nodded. Nephis agreed, "All right, but not here." With that, she gave the others a sign to wait and walked away. Sonny followed. His shadow stayed, making sure that no one was going to try and eavesdrop on them. It was staring directly at Castor, following his every move with intense attention. As they were walking, Sonny suddenly offered, "By the way, I have something to tell to you too." Nephis glanced at him and slightly raised an eyebrow, then asked, "Yes, what is it?" Sonny was silent for a bit. Then he smiled and said, "Oh, it's nothing serious. Do you remember a guy called Harper?" She frowned, then shook her head and asked, "Should I? Who is he?" Sonny shrugged. His expression remained neutral as he said, "Just a guy that I killed. He was one of Gunlog's spies." Nephis looked at him for a few moments, then asked with indifferent confusion, "What about him?" A slight shadow ran over Sonny's face. However, his smile remained exactly the same as he conceded, "No, nothing. Just wondered if you knew him." When they walked far enough and were concealed from the eyes of the cohort by several tall walls, Changing Star stopped and turned to face him. Looking at Sonny, Nephis said, "It is good that we can speak privately. Actually, I wanted to ask you a favor." He blinked and remarked, "Well, that is unexpected." "What is it?" Sonny asked. She hesitated for a few moments. Nephis said, "After my fight with Gunlog is over, when I win, I might not be in the best shape. Even if I am, there will be a flood of soul essence pouring into my body. It will incapacitate me for a bit." The changes that happened to the body after a small portion of soul essence was consumed were subtle, but in large quantities. It could be disorienting, sometimes even debilitating for a short while. Sometimes, experiencing these changes and getting used to them took a little time. Sonny tilted his head and wondered aloud, "A flood of soul essence? What does it matter if her core is either full to the brim or at least almost saturated?" He frowned, trying to guess what he wanted from him, then asked, "So what do you need me to do? Keep Horus busy while you recover?" She shook her head, then looked away. A light sigh escaped from Changing Star's lips. Nephis said, "No, I want you to make sure that Castor is nowhere near me when that happens." Here it was, the truth was about to come out. Sonny stared at Nephis, his expression cold and dark. After a few moments of tense silence, he demanded, "Why? What's the deal with you and Castor?" She looked at him, her striking gray eyes calm and deep. Then Nephis said, "It's very simple, really. Castor has been sent here to kill me." Sonny remained silent for a few moments. Finally, it became clear that Nephis wasn't going to continue. Feeling a slight sense of exasperation, he asked, "Why would Castor want to kill you?" Despite the calm appearance, there was a tempest raging in his mind. The revelation of Castor's true intention had shaken Sonny. Yes, he disliked the proud legacy, and yes, their dynamic with Changing Star had always been a bit strange, but he never expected to hear something like this. In his mind, Castor was more of an opportunist with distasteful ambitions, most likely having to do with the purity of his clan's bloodline than a cold-blooded killer. In what world did him wishing to kill Nephis made any sense? He was her #1 fan. The only logical explanation Sonny could find was that the proud scion had been secretly working for Gunlog all along. But then, that theory also didn't hold when subjected to a close inspection. The Bright Lord was determined to kill Changing Star with his own 2 hands and in front of hundreds of people. What would he need Castor for? Nephis lingered for a bit, then shrugged and replied, People have been trying to kill me for as long as I can remember. Have you forgotten?" Sonny slowly shook his head and replied, "No, I did not. But what does that have to do with Castor?" She smiled and said, "They were not going to stop just because I came of age, survived my first nightmare, and was sent into the dream realm. If anything, that would have been the perfect opportunity to finally make me disappear forever. Sleepers enter this cursed world alone, away from the protections of society and whatever allies they might have in the real one. Do you see?" He gave her a nod, his expression growing dark. Indeed, no one was as vulnerable as young sleepers entering the dream realm for the first time. Nephis sighed and looked away, then added, "In any case, when I enrolled into the academy, I knew that someone among our classmates had to have received orders to make sure that I never returned from the dream realm. I just didn't know who it was." Suddenly, she glanced at him. The corner of her lips curled upward as Nephis remarked, "Actually, for a long time, I thought that it was you." Sonny blinked and stared at her in disbelief, then snapped, "What, me? Are you CR? Actually, never mind. What exactly about me made you think that I'm an agent of some secret legacy cabal? Do I look like a legacy to you?" Nephis calmly looked him in the eye and answered, "Honestly, not any legacy that I know, but there were too many things about you that didn't make sense." He frowned and said, "Do tell." She slowly raised her hand, then began counting on her fingers. Nephis said, "Let's see. You claim to be an orphan from the outskirts, but somehow managed to survive both the first nightmare and the arrival on the Forgotten Shore. You didn't consume any soul shards, but kept growing more powerful. You said that you had never held a sword in your hand, but absorbed my lessons with astonishing speed. And finally, every other word you said was a lie, especially when it came to your origins. Your past, your strength, and your aspect." Running out of fingers on one hand, she made a fist and pointed to it, asking, "Need I continue?" Sonny cleared his throat and muttered, "No, well, when you put it like this." She smiled and shook her hand, then lowered it. Nephis said, "But after some time, I realized that my suspicions about you were wrong. If you were really tasked with killing me, you could have just left me on the Ashen Barrow. Back then, I was as good as dead. But you didn't. In fact, you risked a lot to take both Cassie and me with you." The smile slowly disappeared from her face. Nephis continued, "So when we reached the bright castle and Castor immediately appeared, insinuating his way into my inner circle, I knew pretty much instantly that it was him." Sonny frowned and said, "Aren't you getting ahead of yourself? Don't get me wrong, I'm the last person in this world who would want to defend that pompous bastard, but there were hundreds of sleepers in our crop, and out of those, only 7 were sent to the Forgotten Shore, and only 4 lived long enough to see the castle. What are the chances that the person with orders to make you vanish was among them? Isn't it a bit too big of a coincidence?" Changing Star slowly shook her head and replied, "Who said it was a coincidence? People often tend to forget that the spell has a mind of its own. It sees all and hears all, and it really loves to play with fate. If there was someone among those hundreds of people tasked with killing me, the chances of me having a fateful encounter with them in the dream realm would be all but guaranteed. That is how the spell always does things." Sonny had to agree. The spell indeed loved to play with fate. His whole damn life was proof of that. Meanwhile, Nephis continued, "Of course, despite my suspicions, I wasn't sure at first, but the more I observed Castor, the more convinced I became that I was right. He did everything in his power to get close to me, and then tried his hardest to subtly isolate me from everyone I could have trusted. He spent his time studying my every move, while keeping his secrets close to his chest. It's him. I've been sure of it for a long time." Sonny tilted his head, trying to digest this new information. After a while, he asked, "If Castor wanted to kill you, why hasn't he made a move to kill you yet?" She lingered for a bit, then smiled slightly and said, "Because among all of the humans on the Forgotten Shore, he knows what the scions of the immortal Flame clan are capable of the best. Isn't it ironic? He respects my ability too much to be careless, maybe even fears it, and he can't allow himself to fail. His honor won't allow it. So, Castor won't attack until he is absolutely sure that I won't be able to resist. He'll make his move when I have no chance to escape." Sonny scratched the back of his head and asked, "Let me rephrase that. If Castor wants to kill you, why is he still alive? Why didn't you kill him already?" He was sure that if Nephis wanted to, the proud legacy would have been dead a long time ago. Changing Star hesitated, and then said in an even tone, "Because I need him for what is to come. It doesn't matter that he intends to betray me. Traitor or not, he is of use." Sometime later, the six of them left the secluded ruin and made their way toward the bright castle. The dark city was silent and bleak, its streets devoid of life and movement. Even the nightmare creatures seemed to remain hidden in their lairs today, as though feeling the tension that hung in the air like a harbinger of a disastrous change. A lonely star was about to ignite in the sky above the cursed city. Nephis was the first one to walk under the marble arch and step on the road that led to the outer settlement. Her face was calm and motionless, any hint of emotion hidden behind her usual mask of indifference. It was as though she was returning home in triumph, not marching to her own execution. There was a slightly distant look in her eyes. Sonny abandoned his usual position at the back of the group and was now walking side by side with her. Maybe it was just a whim. But he felt unwilling to follow in her footsteps as he had always done before, from the first day they met. As they ascended the tall hill, Changing Star suddenly asked, "Sonny, do you remember your first nightmare well?" Her voice sounded relaxed and idle. He cast a sideways glance at her and hesitated for a few moments. Then he replied in an even tone, like it was yesterday. She smiled slightly and asked, "Was it hard?" Slowly, a grin appeared on his face. Sonny said, "Hard? No, not hard. Impossible. It was a ghastly, despicable, and torturous ordeal, truly the stuff of nightmares. Calling it hard would be an injustice." With a dismissive shrug, Sonny drove the memories of the Black Mountain away and asked, "What about yours?" Nephis looked away, remembering. After a while she said, "Mine wasn't that bad actually." He stared at her in disbelief and retorted, "What, you only had to kill a measly 1,000 unholy titans with your bare hands or something like that? Knowing you, not that bad, means that it was nothing short of a true horror show." She slowly shook her head. Nephis said, "No, I mean it. I didn't have to fight anyone really, up until the very end." Sonny blinked and asked, "Wait, seriously?" A strangely sad smile appeared on her lips. Nephis said, "In my first nightmare, I was the daughter of a lighthouse keeper. My family lived in a beautiful tower on the shore of a beautiful sea. Every morning, the warm sun rose from beyond the horizon, bathing the endless expanse of azure waves in beautiful light. The winds were gentle and the world was kind. It was me, my parents, and my younger siblings. We lived together in harmony, humbly but needing for nothing." He frowned and asked, "And then what? A sea serpent destroyed the lighthouse. Some rotten horror rose from the depths." Changing Star's eyes became distant. A few moments passed before she spoke again, and Nephis said, "No, nothing happened. That was the point of it, I think. My nightmare. It was actually a paradise. It was everything I dreamed about when I was a little kid, only much more wondrous and human than I could have ever imagined." Sonny looked at her in utter shock. As he watched, the hint of sorrow disappeared from Neff's face, replaced by a subtly harsh expression. Nephis said, "But that was what made it so hard to overcome. Impossible even, just like you said. Because all I had to do to conquer the nightmare, all I had to do was to walk away and leave it all behind, knowing that I could just stay there in that paradise, forever." He hesitated for a while, then asked cautiously, "So what did you do?" A heavy sigh escaped from Neff's lips. Her eyes grew dim. Nephis said, "I searched for a way out of the nightmare for a long time, but no matter how hard I looked, there wasn't any, day after day, night after night. As time went by, it became harder and harder to force myself to continue searching. I grew accustomed to that bliss, that warm and beautiful life, and eventually a day came when I thought that maybe I should stop. Maybe I can just stay." She tilted her head slightly, her tantalizing voice reaching the deepest, darkest parts of his heart, and said, "That was the day I went to the top of the lighthouse. You see, Sonny, you have to light yourself on fire, to rip the blessings of the fire. That was what my grandmother used to say, so that was what I did. I doused myself in oil and set myself aflame." The white flames suddenly licked her hands, and she stared at them, her face slowly turning pale, her eyes reflecting the terrible agony she felt. As her ivory skin continuously boiled, darkened, and then healed to become pristine again, she said simply, "And I burned." Suddenly, the flames disappeared and she made a fist. Her voice grew a little strained as Nephis said, "And after a long time, when all of it was over, I found myself in a dark cave nestled in a slimy cocoon of black silk. All around me, thousands upon thousands of people were sleeping in similar cocoons with their eyes open, with happy smiles on their empty faces. And above us was a creature so revolting and abhorrent that I can't bring myself to describe it to this day. It was feeding on our dreams." She grew quiet for a bit, and then added, "That creature was convulsing in pain as though it shared in the agony I felt too. Somehow, I managed to break free of the cocoon and kill it before it fully regained its senses." She glanced at him and smiled. However, there was no warmth in that smile. Nephis said, "That was how I conquered my first nightmare." Sonny looked her in the eyes for a long time silent. Then he slowly turned away and said, "Just as I said, the stuff of nightmares. I guess we call them that for a reason." Changing Star laughed. Nephis said, "I guess. But really, fighting that terror wasn't the hardest part. Waking up trapped in a repulsive cocoon wasn't the hardest part. Even burning alive wasn't the hardest part." She grew silent for a few moments and then said, looking at the white road beneath their feet, "The hardest part was walking up the steps to the top of the lighthouse. Not because of what waited for me in the future, but because of what I was leaving in the past." Soon, the familiar shapes of the outer settlement appeared in their sight. They had finally returned to the bright castle. The outer settlement had changed from the time Sonny saw it last. At the point where the white road widened into the vast platform that the settlement stood upon, a tall stone barricade was built, with watchful sentries observing the approach to the crest of the hill. Each of them was wielding a memory weapon and a sturdy armor, their faces full of dark determination. The makeshift watchtower constructed on the roof of Neph's lodge loomed above them, with several archers ready to rain arrows on any nightmare creature that wandered close. The slum itself was much the same, but the people populating it seemed different. Many of them were bruised and bandaged, but their eyes shone with the subtle light of hope that wasn't there or as strong before. That hope was contrasted against the suffocating feeling of tension that hung in the air. From time to time, someone would glance toward the castle and frown, a dark expression appearing on their face. There was another detail that surprised Sonny. On the sleeves of many slum dwellers, a piece of pure white cloth was tied, as though announcing their allegiance to some god or goddess. There had been none of that when he left this place a few months ago. There were also graffiti drawn on the walls of the most derelict hovels, some of them depicting a shining star, some the image of a beautiful bronze spear. Sonny muttered, "What is that all about?" The white armbands and the star were, obviously, meant to represent Nephis. But when had Effie suddenly become an apostle? Glancing at the voracious huntress, he raised an eyebrow and asked, "Anything you want to tell me?" She scratched the back of her head, then shrugged. Effie said, "I've become a bit of a folk hero apparently." Sonny shook his head and didn't press the issue, muttering, "Whatever." When the sentries saw who was approaching, their faces first became shocked, and then lighted up with intense jubilation. "Lady Nephis, its changing star. Lady Nephis has returned. She is alive." The hum of voices spread through the entire settlement in an instant. If Gunlog had not known that they were back in the Dark City, he would have learned of it now. But he knew, of course. He knew it long before the people of the slum ever laid their eyes on their supposed savior. Sonny looked past the outer settlement, at the mighty walls of the bright castle. How long before its lord throws them a welcome party? Soon, the cohort was surrounded by a crowd of exhilarated people. Everyone wanted to see that Saint Nephis was alive and well with their own eyes. The other members were bathing in attention too, especially Effie. Effie. Huntress Athena. Welcome home, Effie, show them. The huntress grinned in bewilderment and kept quiet. In the crowd, there were a few faces that did not share in everyone's joy. They were the leaders of the outer settlement's hunting parties. The gazes they threw at Nephis were grim and full of meaning. She gave them a nod, letting the experienced hunters know that she understood the message they were trying to relay. Then, Changing Star faced the inhabitants of the slum and took the bag that Effie handed her. Slowly unclasping it, she spoke. Her calm voice, effortlessly making the crowd grow silent.
I am not good with words, so please accept my gratitude, dreamers of the Dark City. The past few months have been harsh on me and the members of my cohort, but they must have been equally as harsh on you. However, we have persevered. You here in these cursed ruins, and we out there in the ghastly depths of the labyrinth. But all of it was not in vain.
With that, she took something from the bag and tossed it to the ground. Suddenly, a deathly silence settled over the crowd. Everyone was staring at the object laying on the stones, expressions of fear clearly written on many faces. It was a terrifying, jagged black talon which was as sharp and long as a sword. And then, another one fell near it, and another, and another. Eventually, 38 of these dark blades lay in a pile in front of Nephis. 30 from the 6 front limbs of the spire messenger, and 8 from the 2 hind ones. Closing the bag, Nephis put it on her shoulder and said, her tone dark and piercing.
Out there in the labyrinth, we have fought and slew one of the cursed messengers of the Crimson Spire. I bring you its claws as a gift to become your weapons.
Stunned whispers ran through the crowd. The messengers were both a symbol of terror and a symbol of hope to the people of the Dark City. Terror because of their horrifying power and appetite, as well as their connection to the dreaded spire, and hope because of the legends that once, a long time ago, a group of powerful sleepers had managed to kill one. And now, the legend came alive right in front of their eyes. Nephis lingered for a moment, and then sighed, a somber note appearing in her voice.
Many years ago, we, those who were sent to the Forgotten Shore, weren't yet imprisoned by fear, enthralled by the sin of those cowards who had forgotten that they are, first and forever, humans. Back then, there were people among us willing to risk their lives to conquer this hell, escape it. The First Lord and his companions were the greatest of them. And now...
Brilliant sparks of light suddenly appeared around her head like a sacred halo. Changing Star's eyes shined with pure white radiance, and as the crown of dawn weaved itself from light and fell upon her head, she spoke. She didn't rise or even strain her voice, but the impact of her words only grew because of it.
I have brought his legacy back to the Dark City. This is the crown of the First Lord. We have retrieved it from a place of eternal darkness where he had fallen in battle. He died trying to find a way out of this cursed land for all of us to follow.
She paused for a moment and then said, her face illuminated by the brilliant white flames that burned in her furious eyes. On her forehead, the single gem decorating the dawn shard shone with that brilliance, too, almost like a third eye.
And with it, we will finish what he started.